Mm.
Oh,
Uh, yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the Apostate Prophet. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I hope I'm having a fantastic day too.
you can't because you're a cougher.
Yeah.
Every day you're miserable all day.
And we all hope David is having a fantastic day as well, although it's not really possible in his case because he doesn't even know what a fantastic day really is. But yeah, David, how are you doing?
Hey, hey, what's up? How you doing?
Good, good. Thank you. I'm going to mute you for a
Powerful.
second. I don't want you to speak. Just
I,
kidding.
I can mute myself like this.
How do you feel after the last conversation that we had on this channel?
Um.
Thank
Oh,
you.
when you and Khalil were arguing for a long time.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um. Yeah, that was cool. That was a good change up because some people like that, right? Some people want to see everyone just go at it. So some people
yeah.
like me, I prefer the nice, calm, rational discussions where you raise your points and I'll respond calmly with my points. But you guys can go ahead and have it out here and there.
I didn't even expect it to to get this way. I thought we would just be having a very friendly, nice, interesting conversation. We would laugh together and all that.
Oh, by the way, I did too because Khalil was totally calm and nice in our uh, in our couple of exchanges. So yeah, I don't know. He must not like you, or you said something to tick him off, or I don't know what's going on with you. Because I mean,
What?
I would regard you and me as pretty even in terms of how offensive we are when dealing with Islam. So but he wasn't he wasn't jumping all over me and like interrupting and stuff like that when he was talking to me. But then he did with you. So yeah, I don't know.
It
But
looked like
is
he
it?
had a problem with me. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if he's got like less of a problem with Christians, or maybe because you're an ex-Muslim, or maybe he's just seen something from you that he didn't like. I don't know. I have no idea. We could ask him about it.
I don't know. I even had a fellow professor who is in touch with him message me on Twitter afterwards saying, "Hey, um, I have no idea why Khalil interacted like this with you. He's normally not like that. But maybe try talking to him again." And I thought, I don't care really anymore. But that was indeed quite strange. Um, yeah, maybe he just doesn't like what I have to say. Maybe he
Maybe he
just
doesn't
doesn't
like your face,
probably, or he doesn't like interacting with atheists or something
or
like that.
Turkish people.
Yeah, Turkey
Maybe
people,
he doesn't like your dumb accent.
probably. But yeah, no, anyway, it's nice. It's nice. It's over now, and it must have been love, but it's over now.
Must have been love, but it's over now.
Yeah. Anyway, today we are going to respond to Farid response and one of his friends who was on his channel by the name of Abu Amina Elias, who's actually a convert. And I forgot what his name is Justin Parrott, I think. That's his name. His actual name, Justin Parrott. And he has this website called Abu Amina Elias where he posts hadiths and stuff like that. Very, very interesting guy.
Uh, uh, it, in the name of full disclosure, I did not watch this video. I watched the very beginning, like I don't know, minute or two or something like that, and then this dude said that Islam abolished slavery, and Fareed seemed to agree, and Fareed made the most insane claim I've ever. Like I don't even know. I mean, was he being deceptive, or did he really think? I can't tell because it's so. I've never heard this before. Like of all the lies and insane, deceptive claims I've heard over the years in order to defend this, I've never even heard this one. And so this is amazing. Like it's correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like Fareed was saying that Muslims can have sex with their Christian and Jewish sex slaves, but not with a pagan sex slave. I'm like,
Oh yeah,
what
yeah,
in
yeah.
the world? What sources is he reading? I don't even know. So I'm hoping he actually gets to what he's basing this on, because I have no clue what he's talking about.
It's also funny that he sits there and nods while this other guy says that Islam abolishes slavery. I mean, he's also the same guy who then listens to Daniel Kikachu argue for slavery, and he's like, yeah, good job, man. It's
That's
it's
the
wild.
puzzle. It's like, why is, I mean, if Islam somehow abolished slavery, then when, someone like Kikachu stands up, why do they cheer for him and say, wow, great defense of slavery?
Great defense. You have demolished the enemies of Islam by explaining how Islamic slavery is actually good.
And it's weird because it's not even something where it's like debatable according to the Muslim sources, like mutta, right? So temporary marriage. You see a prostitute, you want to have sex with the prostitute, you want to pay the prostitute, no problem. Allah gave a halal path to that. You just do temporary marriage. You say you get her to agree, we're going to be married for an hour while I bang you, and I'm going to pay you, and then think of that as dowry or something like that. But it's the same. It's the same thing as prostitution. It's just the halal version of it. But you find in the Muslim sources, no one will dispute that Muhammad allowed it for a while, according to the Sunni sources. But there's a dispute in the Muslim sources about whether Muhammad forbade the practice or whether one of the later Muslim rulers forbade the practice. And you find both of them. So if you were to ask, is mutta allowed today? It would be debatable according to the hadith, right? You could look at it and you could say, okay, this guy, and this guy said that Muhammad forbade it. This guy, and this guy said that Muhammad never forbade it. It was a later Muslim ruler. And so the question is, do you have to obey this later Muslim who said it? When no? And the answer would be not necessarily, because he can't trump something that Allah and Muhammad allowed. And in other words, if Muhammad and Allah say that it's halal, a later Muslim ruler, I mean, he could make people not do it, but it doesn't mean that would be binding on a Muslim today. And so there's stuff like that. But then, like slavery, I'm thinking, like, and not having sex with your pagan captives, like I can't even think of what he would be referencing from the Muslim sources.
Like here's an example. You just brought up the whole temporary marriage muta thing, and when a Muslim tells me this has been abolished, I can normally go into some of the regular known books of Islamic law and confirm that according to the traditional four Muslim schools, it is not allowed. And I can find a confirmation of that specifically, like right here. I mean, I can show it on the screen here. I go to one of the very famous books of Islamic law, which is the Muwatta of Imam Malik ibn Anas, and it has a section here, a very small section on temporary marriage. And it says, it doesn't even comment. It just says that Yahya related to me from Malik, from Ibn Shihab, from Abdullah and Hassan, the sons of Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, from their father, that the Messenger of Allah forbade temporary marriage with women and the flesh of domestic donkeys on the day of Khaybar. And then another one says, cites Umar as saying, if I had witnessed the temporary marriage, I would have ordered stoning and done away with it. That's what he says, for example. And this is the major law book in the Maliki school of Sunni Islam, which is one of the main schools. And you can find similar things in other sources. So I can sit here and I can honestly verify this and say, okay, you know what, fair enough. I actually do find this in your in these sources, but I couldn't find a single thing ever anywhere. And we will talk about this in a little bit when we watch the video, which says, oh, you shall not have sex with your slaves if they are, of this and that religion, and you should ask their permission and stuff like that. But we'll get to that.
But by the way, little side note that ties it in with things we've been talking about recently. So yes, you have passages like this, but you also have passages in Bukhari and Muslim where mutta was still allowed after the time of Muhammad, and it was a later Muslim ruler who forbade it. And if you tie it in with what people like Joshua Little were claiming, Joshua Little claims that that Islam after the time of Muhammad was basically regional, and that you ended up with different rulings in different areas of of the domain of Islam. And you could go to one city and muta would be perfectly acceptable, and you could go to another city and muta was not acceptable. And then his claim is that eventually, when they needed this just one Islam and everyone had to be on the same page, these guys from these different areas start fabricating isnads to go earlier and earlier to say that their ruling actually goes back to Muhammad. And then the response is that no, it doesn't go back to Muhammad. It went back to a later caliph or something like that, and so on. So that actually makes sense of why you have these competing claims, giving contradictory statements that are both considered authentic narrations, that are both in Islam's most trusted sources, and yet they say the exact opposite. So, I mean, someone like Fareed should notice, hey, you got a screwed up method if you have these completely contradictory claims in sources using the exact same methodology that you affirm as this gold standard of correct reasoning.
Now, wait a minute, David. If we look at the narrators, we find that so-and-so was an unreliable person. You should know this. And
oh, because, David, how do you not know this?
all right, are you ready to watch the video?
It's going to be powerful stuff. I might change my mind on everything.
Probably. So there's some discrepancy in the sound levels here. I tried fixing it before we started the video. David actually drew my attention to that, but then it would take too much effort to normalize the sound level of this whole thing. But basically, my voice, they're reacting to my video, and my voice is lower than their voices, and that's just their lack of professionalism.
And so AP. Amateur hour is not going to fix it before we watch it.
So. Inshallah, yes. With that said, let us begin.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That was very loud in my ear. Was it very loud to you too? What was that? Shrill.
Alhamdulillah, today I'm joined by Abu Amina Ilyas, and we're going to go through Apostate Prophet's video on sex.
These are the times where he still used to call me Apostate Prophet, because he wasn't through all of my videos yet. He hadn't established the whole disgust and hate for me yet.
So this is from a while back.
Yeah, it is. These are his first videos against me that I never reacted to because I thought they were very dumb. But,
so that might explain why. I don't know. Did he just not know anything about Islam and he thought that you weren't allowed to have sex with a pagan captive, or was he just more deceptive back then?
And he is supposed to be a scholar at this point, at the publishing of this video, right? He's supposed to be or at least a student of knowledge on Islamic science, hadith science, and stuff like that. So he shouldn't be saying nonsensical.
But by the way, we always forget to credit Fareed when we're talking about the holes in the narrative stuff. But he was the one. Wasn't he the one who was behind the scenes that caused the entire holes in the narrative problem? Like,
yeah,
he had seen some chat with Yasser Qadi where Yasser Qadi obviously didn't believe in the perfect preservation of the Quran, and Fareed knew he was putting on like these two faces, and so he started exposing him that he has these problems behind the scenes. And then Muhammad Hijab thought, oh, I'll fix this, I'll get him on my live stream and he'll explain everything and then it'll be perfectly clear. And it was like the biggest disaster in the history of Islam. Thanks for Raid. You're doing a bang up job.
Yeah, fantastic. Very, very well done. He started the whole holes in the narrative. Great. That's what Fareed does. He just starts a bunch of doubts in the community, and terrible. Yeah.
Slavery in Islam. Abu Amina.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good to see you, akhi.
Habibi, yalla, let's get to it.
Habibi, yaki.
Common sense. If you have non-consensual sex with a woman, no matter who she is, that is rape.
These are times where I was still talking. I couldn't speak proper English.
If you have a servant at home and you think you can just make her have sex with you because she is your servant, that.
Okay, so
yeah, you do sound different. That's funny.
I know.
It's not even that long ago. It's just a few years ago. Anyway,
it is 5 years ago or something like that. I don't know.
Picture right here is pretty dishonest because nobody says that you're allowed to have sex with your maid, like, or at least nobody of any repute. No Muslim scholars say to have sex with your maids. So slavery has been abolished, and that was done according to principles of Islamic law. And if you're interested
What?
in that story,
What?
There's so much stuff here, but
What?
it's already.
He couldn't say one sentence without being totally wrong.
And he's reacting. I mean, I'm just counting things. Like I'm just counting stuff that is considered rape. I'm not even coming to what is allowed according to Islam. I'm just counting things. And he's already like, this is very deceptive. In Islam, this is not allowed. I mean, learn to listen, man. But then he says slavery has been abolished.
He said, according to Islamic principles. Guys, don't know how to break this to you. Saudi Arabia didn't abolish slavery until 1962 because of the UN and John F. Kennedy. And up until then, and the reason John F. Kennedy told him to do it and told him to get in line with the UN is Saudi leaders were actually showing up to the U.S. for discussions with U.S. leaders, and they were bringing African slaves with them. They were bringing their African slaves with them for discussions. And so people are shocked that these Saudi leaders are showing up with African slaves. They're like, hey, what's going on there? And then John F. Kennedy told them to end that practice, or they're going to have some serious problems. And by that time, the UN had already put out stuff on human rights and so on, abolishing slavery. And Saudi Arabia decided to get on board with the rest of the world. And we ask our friend here, how did it happen? Oh, they were just reading the Muslim sources, and they said, you know what? Slavery is wrong.
It's just ridiculous. Slaves were still bought and sold quite recently on the main squares of Islamic countries and the empire. So
and it still goes on. It still goes on in Saudi Arabia itself. You just got to keep it on the down low. Here's from the U.S. This is from the U.S. State Department in 2005. Saudi Arabia is a destination for men and women from South and East Asia and East Africa trafficked for the purpose of labor exploitation, and for children from Yemen, Afghanistan, and Africa trafficked for forced begging. Hundreds of thousands of low-skilled workers from India, Indonesia, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Kenya migrate voluntarily to Saudi Arabia. Some fall into conditions of involuntary servitude, suffering from physical and sexual abuse, non-payment or delayed payment of wages, the withholding of travel documents, restrictions on their freedom of movement, and non-consensual contract alterations. The government of Saudi Arabia does not comply with the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking and is not making significant efforts to do so. In other words, it's still going on, and the Saudi government doesn't do anything about it, even though slavery has officially been abolished. This is just like when these countries make laws against child marriage, but people continue marrying children because it's allowed in Islam, and the authorities don't crack down on this stuff because they know they'd run into problems with the religious leaders who say, how are you imposing Western law on us?
Yeah, which is of course a very terrible and Islamophobic thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you have some simple maps. I'm not sure if the information on here is entirely accurate, but just to give a quick example of when slavery is abolished by country, and there's a difference between officially abolishing slavery and banning slavery. So there is some of the data per country is discrepant, but you can see that here in some Muslim countries it existed quite far into the 20th century still, and it was only abolished under pressure from the West. From the West, it was still there. It wasn't. Muslims did not think, you know what, slavery is actually a terrible thing, and it's not in alignment with our Islamic values and beliefs at all. We should get rid of this. No, they were forced into getting rid of it. Basically, they were pressured into it.
This is a quotation from Gerald Posner, who's a historian of Saudi Arabia. He says, Saudi Arabia didn't end slavery until President Kennedy asked them to. Every major Saudi family had one or more black slaves. You catch that? Every major Saudi family had one or more black slaves. The visiting Saudi rulers came to America and brought one of their slaves with them. That's when Kennedy asked them to officially abolish slavery, and they did. Why? Because you don't want to get on the bad side of the West when you come to depend on the West.
Yeah, that is.
So this dude, I mean, I actually have no clue what he's talking about. I mean, you can find passages about freeing a slave is a good deed in certain circumstances and stuff like that. But as far as like it just abolished slavery based on these wonderful Islamic principles, dude's in fantasy land.
Yeah, I think that in the last caliphate in the Ottoman Empire, slavery was abolished in the 19th century. Although
Wait, where?
it still continued in practice in the Ottoman Empire. It was officially abolished in the 19th century, but it still continued in practice. And it was not abolished because of Islam. On the contrary, it was abolished by by political movements and groups within the country that wanted to push a reformation, modernization, and westernization of Ottoman law. So accrediting Islam for the abolishing of slaves is just completely ridiculous. It's dishonest. It's false. Yeah.
Called Islam and the Abolition of Slavery. It's Oxford University Press, and it explains the arguments that Muslims made to abolish slavery. And so there's no more slavery, and therefore there's no more concubinage. And you can't make this analogy with maids, and nobody says that you're allowed to have sex with your maids. So that's a pretty dishonest picture right there.
Yeah, that's literally what we just read from the U.S. State Department about what happens in Saudi Arabia, that people go there to be workers as maids. And how many times have we heard this story where someone from the Philippines or something like that goes to a Muslim nation to work and then finds out as soon as she gets there she's actually a sex slave? Yeah. Heard that over and over and over again. And the Saudi government, what do? Unless there's international pressure, they look the other way. They just don't care. Why? Because they know that, they think it's fine with Islam.
Yeah.
So anyway, point is, AP is not the one massively misrepresenting the situation with his picture of a maid here.
Plus, I'm not even using the picture of a maid to say this is how sex slavery works in Islam. I'm just giving examples here at the beginning, and he's immediately jumping on it like, no, he's misrepresenting Islam.
You see?
It's weird.
AP's a deceiver. Look at this grin on Fareed's face like, look, and now we're really schooling the apostate prophet. I hope he doesn't come back a few years from now and quote the Muslim sources to show what liars we are.
Oh, no. Terrible.
My opinion.
That is rape. If a woman depends on you in any way and you have sex with her without her wanting it, or despite her explicitly being against it, that is rape. Sex with prisoners.
But what if her parents consent?
Not free humans would be considered.
Just for the sake of thinking, there are slaves who willingly entered into sexual relationships with their masters, and I would like to know if he thought that was immoral if they consented to it. And it was also a way to raise their social status.
Rape.
So, I don't even... whatever.
So there he said... Now I don't even understand what he's talking about, because on one hand he's saying Islam abolished slavery, but on the other hand he's saying yes, there were female slaves who willingly had sex with their masters. They were really turned on by their masters.
This is one of those things, you are having a discussion here about something serious, and then somebody suddenly raises a thought, and everybody stops talking, looks at that person, nobody says anything, and then they just move on with the conversation. This is one of those moments.
Yeah. I do want to say he is correct in the sense of a woman could see this as a way of improving her social status, in the sense that if your people have been conquered and you want to actually marry someone, you could say, okay, then I'm not going to be Muhammad had wives that were like that, but the idea that that's all that Islam allows, that the woman has to consent and so on. Yeah, we're about to see some problems with that one, sport.
Yeah. Victor said, damn, AP's voice was smooth before he began to smoke. You're completely getting it wrong. At the time of making this video, I used to vape like 24/7, and after smoking for many, many years, actually, as of today, I have quit smoking. I quit smoking 4 years ago or so. So,
bravo! Yeah, I used to. Gosh, was it that long ago? Because I used to remember, like, we'd be about to go live, and you'd be catching a few puffs off.
Oh yeah. You ready, David?
You ready? I'm about to click live.
Yeah, yeah. I used to way back then. And one day I realized when I was actually under the influence of different stuff, I realized I was wheezing a lot while I'm breathing, and then I thought to myself,
That was the
"What in
crack?
the world am I doing to myself?" No,
Yeah,
I was
dude.
on
Crystal
on some
meth. You got to stay off that crystal meth stuff, man. I
no,
know
no.
it might help you during the live stream if you get real high too. But
No, I was on marijuana, which is very relatively innocent. But it was then that I realized I'm wheezing all the time when I'm breathing. Why am I doing this to myself? I will now stop. And then I threw everything away and actually quit. So that's funny. Just a quick side note. Get your facts straight, Victor. Let's go on.
When we talk about female slaves and captives of war, ISIS released a disgusting, horrible pamphlet in 2000.
So I just wanted to say here, I'm also disgusted by ISIS, and so are the vast majority of Muslims across the world. If you just Google ISIS popularity polls, you'll find Pew and you'll find others. You'll find that they have very little to no popular support. They have almost zero popular support in Lebanon.
Now, this is really problematic.
It's what's funny is I'm not even giving ISIS here as an example for Muslims or all Muslims around the world. I'm just mentioning some important development that recently happened where ISIS did indeed publish such a pamphlet. But since he asks us to look at popularity polls of ISIS, I actually Googled it. And this is from 2015. It polls different countries and their views of ISIS, unfavorable, favorable, or don't know. It finds he is correct. In Lebanon, it's 100% unfavorable. But Lebanon is also a country that has a history with Islamism and is still, I think, majority Christian, and then Shia and Sunnis. They have a very complex makeup of people. But then the other countries, you actually find some, you find that even in Turkey, only 73% say unfavorable. And at that time in Turkey, everybody knew what ISIS is. 8%
yeah, that was one of the main areas. If you wanted to get to the Islamic State, lots of people go through Turkey.
Yeah.
You'd fly into Turkey and then travel to go join the Islamic State.
You have Jordan, 94% unfavorable. Nice. Palestinians, 84. Nice. Because ISIS was against their struggles too. Nigeria, 14% favorable, 66% unfavorable. This is just Muslims. Malaysia, Senegal, you have Pakistan here. I wonder why he didn't mention Pakistan, which had 28% unfavorable, 9% favorable, 62% no opinion. I don't know. I wonder why he didn't mention all of these things and immediately went to Lebanon, which he would normally never cite as a country, to give an example on how people view Islam. So very, very interesting stuff. But yeah, no, I agree. ISIS is not very, very popular.
And by the way, notice, some of these places, Lebanon, Jordan, they're pretty close. They're pretty close to ISIS.
Yeah.
These, in other words, it doesn't have to be. We think ISIS is really misrepresenting Islam with their view that you can take sex slaves as you can use your captives as sex slaves. It's not that. They could be horrified at certain things, but a lot of these people are also going to be. We do not want to be controlled by these people, right? And notice the further you get away, so you go way further east, like in Pakistan, or you go way further west, like in Nigeria, and the further away you get from them, the stronger the support is. So the most vehemently opposed to them are the people who could have conceivably been brought under their control and they didn't want it.
Yeah. One question raised was here. Morgan said ISIS was against the Palestinian struggle. Partially, they actually officially declared war on Hamas, I believe, at a time where they were quite successful and causing a lot of turmoil in the Middle East, but not because they disagreed with Palestinian independence, but rather because they disagreed with the Palestinian authorities and with Hamas, how they handle things, how they seek their way through their own authority or through secularization, things like that. Whereas ISIS wanted them all to unconditionally pledge allegiance to the Islamic State and become a subject of the Islamic State, and their refusal to do so ended in a war declaration against them together with Israel. So I think that's how it went. That's how I remember it. But yeah, let's get back to the video.
But by the way, it is always interesting how, in their defense of, because notice what if you say, hey, if you want an idea of how sex slavery works, look at ISIS, and then but lots of people don't like ISIS. One, it's usually not because of the sex slavery, but two, I mean, on what planet is Islam's teaching judged by popular vote? You know what I mean? Like if a bunch of Muslims decided that they can, they can pray to pagan goddesses, you wouldn't say, oh, okay, therefore it's fine because that's, so many Muslims think it's okay.
Yeah. Messianic Apostate added ISIS was against Palestinian jihadist groups because they were nationalist groups. Probably, yeah. I think that was my understanding to an extent. They rejected all ideologies outside of the Islamic Caliphate and told them to join or to prepare for war. They were quite delusional, man.
Really strange coming from Ridvan playing the ISIS card here, because first of all, the vast majority of scholarship believe that it is haram for one to have intercourse with a Yazidi in the first place.
Where is he getting that from?
For someone to have intercourse with a Muslim or a Kitabi.
So he's saying the vast majority of scholars agree that Muslims are not to have sex with a Yazidi woman, because a Yazidi woman would be a straight up disbeliever as opposed to a person of the book. And I never heard this before I watched this video. So
yeah, if he had said Mary, I would know what he's talking about. But the idea that you can't have sex with a pagan sex slave, what in the world?
Yeah, so I'm really curious, Farid. You make a claim here, and I would really like to see sources. You say vast majority of scholars. Which scholars? I looked up some sources, looked up some of the essential fiqh books. I couldn't find a single source in there which says that it is impermissible to have sex with a sex slave that is of a faith not accepted under Islam or people of the book. So I don't see any such thing anywhere, and I'm really curious. Maybe I don't know this. Although I remember that people in the comment section were also asking him where he got this from. So I'm really curious. Where is this from, Farid?
Yeah, I'd like to see that too. Because I mean, right now I have to, because it's Farid, I have to think he's making it up. But if we're actually wrong about this, but notice he's saying scholars. One, we'd first have to hear from these scholars, and two, we'd have to see what in the world this is even based on. Yeah. So you'd like to show us from the Muslim sources, and we'll do that at some point. We'll during this live stream we'll take a look at some Muslim sources, Quran and Hadith.
I mean, I went through some of the scholars, the ones that I have, and I went to the Muwatta of Malik, as I mentioned it earlier, Ibn Hazm. I went through Hanbali books, Hanafi books. I couldn't find a single scholar saying this is forbidden. They were just explaining how you can have sex with your slave, and that's it. No single source I could find that says this specific thing is forbidden. So yeah, I'm really curious, Farid. Mm-hmm. What's up with that?
A Jew or a Christian. So that's the first thing. However, they weren't consistent enough, ISIS, in that they were not consistent in the way they treated Yazidis, because they treated them as mushrikeen, as non-dhimmis when it came to going to war with them. However, they treated them as dhimmis when it came to having intercourse with them. So there are these clear double standards here.
Look, notice everything he just said was predicated on his claim that you can't have sex with a pagan or a polytheist or something like that. Basically non-Muslim, non-Christian, non-Jew. And he's just saying that's what ISIS is inconsistent about. They think you could go to war with them as if they're pagans, but then they think you're allowed to sleep with them, not realizing that they're pagans. It's like, wait, we're still confused on where you're getting this from, Fareed. Because if put it this way, if ISIS was confused about whether they're allowed to have sex with these pagans, so were Muhammad's companions right up until the end, and for many centuries to come, all the way and down to the present. Interesting.
Also, his whole claim that I mean, a lot of it is very foggy, and that's usually what happens when we talk about Islamic law. But it wasn't even in Islamic history. It wasn't even a clear cut. This group is a group of people of the book, and this group is not. Therefore, we cannot accept this group under any circumstances. Like when the Muslims went to conquer India, they did not regard the Hindus initially as acceptable people of the book, because they were not considered acceptable as Dhimma. They did not have the adherence to a belief in one God, nor did they have a book that is supposed to be a revelation by God. So, but they did not know what to do with them. But they can't also go and just slaughter all of the whole Hindu population. That would be impossible for them to do. So they did start treating the Hindus as a Dhimmi population.
Yeah, one of the Muslim rulers just said, okay, now we're including them with Jews and Christians as people who can be dhimmis.
Yeah, because the opposite just doesn't work. They did the same thing with other groups, like the Zoroastrians. Zoroastrians are not monotheistic in the Islamic sense or the Abrahamic sense, and they don't have a revealed book in the same sense. They did not treat them initially as dhimmis, but later on they did, and so yeah, there's a lot of it's all quite vague. But I'm pretty sure if you asked ISIS on whether it's okay to have sex with non-Kitabi slaves or not, they will probably tell you it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter at all. They can be whatever they want. We will kill their husbands and we will take them as sex slaves.
Yeah, and that's why we would love to see Fareed's sources on this, because I mean, if he's got some information, if he's got a source we do not know about, and he's got this source in his back pocket. Meanwhile, these guys are running around raping captives and so on. Dude, if you know how to abolish this with your great knowledge of Islam, how about sharing the source instead of keeping it all? Scholars say. Give us the source from your prophet. Right?
Yeah. And later in a little bit, I can leave some of the talking to, and I can look up a few sources for what scholars actually say about sex slavery. That should be very interesting.
And we can also go to the Quran and Hadith, see what they say.
Of course, that's always the number one thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go on.
And of course, as we can see, Ridvan is making use of that in order to attack Islam as a whole.
Explaining how female slaves are to be treated according to Islam. It is truly disgusting when you read it through, but it was well sourced and explained that female captives are under complete control of their owners.
Actually, it was not well sourced at all. I've actually downloaded the thing. It's like a page. There are barely any sources in the whole thing. But
I can give some sources.
I can't argue against that. I don't even remember what the pamphlet really said. I downloaded it back then, and I think they had an English version of it, but that was
so you were citing an ISIS document or something like that?
Yeah, I was citing an ISIS pamphlet which they published about how to treat slaves. Just to give an example of a current caliphate that takes Islamic morality on slavery and sex slavery, and actually makes a publication on that. Typical example. That's what I was citing, but I barely remember what it really said. But it was outlining these things on how the enemies of Islam are to be fought, their families are to be taken as slaves, and if the slaves then are the property of the Muslims, they own them and they can do with them whatever they want, but there are certain rules and so on. I don't know, long stuff. But we will go in a little bit into all the sources from the Quran and the Hadith.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, good point. And also, his audience doesn't read Arabic, so they're not going to be able to.
Right, he doesn't either. So.
They're not going to check that.
If you are Muslims and heretics, it is totally Islamic to take.
Okay, so this is a point that I think needs to be said, because he's disgusted at the idea of taking prisoners of wars at all. And the Prophet.
I'm pretty sure I never said that. in my in my video. I'm making a big claim here, but I'm pretty sure in my original video, which they are reacting to, I didn't actually say that I am disgusted by the idea of taking prisoners of war. Pretty sure that wasn't the case here, but this is a very strange reaction.
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Istawsu usara khayra. He said, I enjoin you to be good to prisoners. And then because of this, there were Muslims that they converted to Islam. They were idolaters. They were taken prisoner, and then they converted to Islam because they were treated better in Islam than they were by these idolatrous religion.
Yes, look at this. I mean, I just wanted to look up my original video here.
If you are in a state of war,
Muhammad's rape culture.
Yeah, that's.
Hey, what's up with your awesome background? Is that a bed sheet?
No, it was a white veil that I got online. Wait a minute. Let me see.
non-Muslims and heretics. It is totally Islamic.
What is up with your shirt?
Them,
Are those pajamas?
Tribute to the
No.
women among the Muslims, and to go.
In my original video, I didn't say a single thing about how I'm disgusted that you can take prisoners of war or captives. So this guy is reacting to something that I never said, which is very funny. But man. No, yeah, there was an amazing shirt that I had back then, which had some play buttons and pause buttons and stop buttons on it.
It's pretty cool.
It was actually pretty dumb, but yeah.
This is made clear in a hadith, which tells that the Muslims were in a fight, and the Muslims were refraining from having sex with the captives of war because they were already married to the polytheist enemies. When they brought this issue to Muhammad, Allah suddenly revealed a Quran verse mentioning which women are forbidden to marry and to have.
Okay, so in the commentary on this hadith, Imam Nawawi says, as we mentioned earlier, the majority opinion of the scholars that these women had converted to Islam and that they were not idolaters, and that was what allowed them to have sexual intercourse with them in this relationship.
Now, first off, I'm not sure if it really matters whether these women were, Muslims or people of the book or not. The whole point is that Muslims can take female slaves and then have sex with them. But secondly, he mentioned as a source the commentary of Imam Nawawi about this specific hadith. Now, there is one available in English, one of the books that deals with matters like these. Another one is only in Arabic. I looked into the English one in detail, and I even came across a commentary on this specific hadith, but I couldn't find anything in there that says that scholars agree this is only for for Muslim women, for converts, and that you cannot have sex with with the idolaters or anything like that. So I couldn't find something like that in there. So I'm really asking them to give me an actual source which says that, although I think it's quite irrelevant.
So that 424 is on the screen right now. So are they talking about? Were you talking about the Battle of Hunain and Autas?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that what? And they're saying that according to Imam Nawawi, these women converted to Islam. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah.
Was that the claim? Because we can go ahead and matter of fact, this might be a good time to pull up a. This might be a good time to pull up a hadith.
I have this one hadith that I cited in the actual video on here. So the full hadith, as it says.
Wait, scroll down. Oh, that's Sahih Muslim. Yeah, there's a good one in Sunan Abu Dawud. I'll send it to you.
Okay, but let me quickly go to the hadith that this should be the one that I cited on the video, I think. Let me see. 1741, is that the one? 74, yes, this is the one. It says, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri reported that at the Battle of Hunain, Allah's messenger sent an army to Autas and encountered the enemy and fought with them. Having overcome them and taken them captives, the companions of Allah's messenger seemed to refrain from having intercourse with captive women because of their husbands being polytheists. Then Allah, Most High, sent down regarding that, and women already married except those whom your right hands possess. So they were lawful for them with their iddah period came to an end.
It's interesting. The iddah for a captive was actually different, and I would say that the comments on the iddah for a captive being one menstrual cycle sort of calls into question, because it's different rules for Muslim women who are getting divorced.
So this is the one that you just sent me. What does it say?
Yeah, so it's a parallel in Abu Dhabi. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said the Apostle of Allah sent a military expedition to Autas on the occasion of the Battle of Hunayn. So so everyone can get the time frame in their minds, this is shortly after Muhammad conquered Mecca. So Muhammad and his followers conquer Mecca. There were some pagan tribes that were constantly at odds with the Meccans, and actually pretty smart strategic move. Muhammad decides to go fight the enemies, some of the enemies of the Meccans, right? To sort of that would help solidify his, the respect for him in their eyes. These tribes had an interesting war tactic in that they would bring their wives and kids with them to battle to prevent anyone from retreating. In other words, they'd show up to the battle with their wives and kids behind them, knowing that if they get scared and run, their wives and kids are going to be taken captives. But the Muslims won, and then took the women captive, and I believe they enslaved I think around 6,000 people because of this battle. So Muslims fight.
Nice.
They take around 6,000 people captive. Now, in previous battles, they already knew they're allowed to take women as their sex slaves. But these were battles in which they defeated their enemies. Men are dead, and they take the women then as captives. In this situation, they actually, because the men were there, they took the men and the women captive. And so Muhammad's followers started thinking, wait a minute, these women are still married. They're married to polytheists. These women are married to polytheists. So this is a situation where this isn't about them being polytheist. It's about them having polytheist husbands who were still their husbands, right? So wait a minute, isn't this adultery? That's the concern here. The concern here is these women are married to pagan husbands, i.e. they're married. Since they're married, this isn't a normal situation where we killed all the men and we took some women captive, and we know that we can have them as now. These are married women. So let's go ahead and check this out. So Apostle of Allah sent a military expedition to Autas on the occasion of the Battle of Hunayn. They met their enemy and fought with them. They defeated them and took them captives. So they took captives their enemies, so the men. Some of the companions of the Apostle of Allah were reluctant to have relations with the female captives because of their pagan husbands. These ladies are married. So Allah the Exalted sent down the Quranic verse, and also married women are forbidden unto you, save those captives whom your right hand possess. That this is to say that they are lawful for them when they complete their waiting period. So, hey, Muhammad, we need to ask you, are we allowed to have sex with these women who are still married to pagans? And the revelation in response is, yes, married women in general are forbidden to you unless you've captured them. So this is saying, yeah, go ahead and have sex with these slave girls that you just captured, these married slave girls. And somehow our friends are reading this and saying, oh yeah, these women must have converted to Islam, embraced Islam, their hearts melted, and then what? Then there were sex slaves? I don't know.
I'm still
Muslim women sex slaves?
I'm still looking at the commentary by Imam Nawawi, and I can't find any such thing here. So it's very, very puzzling to me. Please, guys, Fareed and the other guy, give me the direct quote where it says that. I would really appreciate that. Thank you. But yeah, and also quickly a reference to the Quran here. The Quran, apparently Allah sends down in this moment from his eternal speech this specific verse which says, and also prohibited to you are all married women except those your right hands possess. This is the decree of Allah upon you, and lawful to you are blah, 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 blah. So all married women except those your right hands possess, which means except slaves whom you own, whom you possess. So it doesn't in any hadith or in the Quran say that these have to be Muslims or anything like that. It just says married women except slaves. So if you have slaves, even if they're married, they are lawful to you.
Let's go ahead and check out, since you just brought up the Quran. I just sent you 2 more passages which say similar things. There's also Surah 33 verse 50, where Muhammad specifically is told that he can have sex with his slave girls. But
oh wait, you said 70, not 7. Yeah. 70:22.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to read because it's a bunch of short verses. Matter of fact, let me just I will just read it for everyone, because it's a bunch of short verses, and you apparently have a problem just pulling up an entire passage instead of one little verse at a time. Why? Because it's amateur hour.
Here, man. Here, you have it. Except
Okay,
the observers of prayer.
Okay. Except the observers of prayer, those who are constant in their prayer, and those within whose wealth is a known right, for the petitioner and the deprived, and those who believe in the day of recompense, and those who are fearful of the punishment of their Lord. Indeed, the punishment of the Lord is not that from which one is safe. And those who guard their private parts, talking about good Muslims, those who guard their private parts, except from their wives or those their right hands possess, for indeed they are not to be blamed. So notice you've got your as far as guarding your private parts, it's except for your wives or those your right hands possess. So there's 2 categories of people you're allowed to have sex with: your captives and your wives.
Yeah.
And that's the Quran. It doesn't say your wives and your captives who are Muslims or people of the book or something like that. That would have made no sense to them.
And in these other 2 verses, it says pretty much the same thing. Those who got their private parts except from their wives or those their right hand possess. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. You're slaves. Slave is. This is Islam, bro.
Of war, because they were already married to the polytheist enemies. When they brought this issue to Muhammad, Allah suddenly revealed a Quran verse mentioning which women are forbidden to marry and to have.
Okay, so in the commentary on this hadith, Imam Nawawi says, as we mentioned earlier, the majority opinion of the scholars that these women had converted to Islam and that they were not idolaters, and that was what allowed them to have sexual intercourse with them in this relationship.
First off, again, entirely irrelevant. Secondly, please give me the source for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and notice, guys, you have multiple issues here. One, whether Imam Nawawi says this. 2, whether the majority of Muslim scholars actually say this. And 3, what are they saying this based on? Right? What's the source that say all these polytheist women, as soon as they saw the Muslims approaching, they converted to Islam and really were sick of their pagan husbands, and they wanted the as Muhammad Hijab would say, that deep down they wanted the men to come in and rape them.
Yeah, thank you, Saint Miles. Always appreciate you being here. See you again. But yeah, so it's such a weird objection to make. The women are captured as prisoners of war, and they think, oh, we will be better off if we just convert to Islam now that we are captives. So they are turned into Muslims, and then the guys have sex with them. So that is their excuse. If we even grant that they are actually telling the truth, how in the world does it make things different?
And by the way, notice I have to regard their entire explanation as like beyond ridiculous and absurd, right? If these women suddenly converted to Islam after the Battle of Al-Tas, right? These women suddenly abandon paganism, convert to Islam. Are Muslim men allowed to are they allowed to divorce their husbands? Yes, that would be considered automatic. If a woman is going to convert to Islam, then she would have to divorce her polytheist husband. And so what would the question even be to Muhammad? Notice, according to their theory right here, these women saw the Muslim army come up, and they said, you know what, we're done with paganism, we're going to become Muslim women. Okay, so according to all the principles that had already been laid down in Islam, would these men be allowed to take these women as their own at that point? Yeah, what would the dispute be? What would they be even asking about? Right? And why would Allah need to reveal, oh, you can't have these, you can't ordinarily have married women, but in this case, it's okay to have sex with married women. Why would he need to? Why would that be an issue? Because according to their theory, these women converted to Islam, they would have divorced their husbands. What's the question? And yet they still come to Muhammad. Hey, what about these women who are married to polytheists? Wait, I thought these were Muslim women who wanted to leave their husbands. What are you talking about? That was easy, right? They could just divorce them, then they would have a little waiting period, and then the men could have sex with them. There is zero dispute here. And in other words, according to these guys' theory, for reading this other guy, there should have been no dispute. It would have been obvious. Look, the women have converted. Now we can go ahead and take them as our own. But that's not what the sources say. They're specifically asking, what about these women who are married to these pagans? What do we do? That's the question. That makes no sense if these guys are right. So, yeah, we'd have to see your sources on this because I'm not buying it.
Yeah, on the side, I'm still looking at Nawawi's interpretation. I don't see any such thing. So, yeah, whatever.
He mentioned some book. So maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's in there. He mentioned a book on how Islam abolished slavery, which is going to be, I mean, that's got to be hilarious. The fact that someone even made that book, but.
So again, instead of viewing this as, the Muslims are stealing these women away, actually, these Muslims were taken from a misogynistic, idolatrous culture that literally treated them like property, and they were brought into the households of Muslims and became part of their family.
Where are you getting this? Show us this. This guy has this convert syndrome where now I can just make up anything I want about how great Islam is.
So those idolaters were apparently very, very misogynistic, right? They were very misogynistic, and the Muslims, they were totally like women's rights activists. They were known for for always being for the rights of women. So they took them in and were like, "Hey, dear slaves, who belong to us." In that other group, you were treated like dirt. You were treated like objects. Now that you are our objects and in our possession, we want to make you feel right. So please go and convert to Islam so that I can have sex with you abundantly, as much as you never had before in your life with your misogynistic husbands and your society.
And by the way, it's always interesting, like the level of narcissism of guys like this. AP, if we wanted to know what Islam is really like for women in that time, for that century, whom should we listen to? This guy who read some book that is obviously insane by Islamic standards, or Aisha, who actually said that she had not seen any woman suffering as much as Muslim women. Right?
Obviously, this guy.
That's Sahih al-Bukhari. Aisha said, I have not seen any woman suffering as much as Muslim women. What was she talking about? She's talking about Muslim husbands treating their wives worse than pagan women or Jewish or Christian women. So, how do you get this? So Aisha is seeing all this first person. She's seeing Muslim husbands beat their wives until their skin literally was green from the beatings. And she says, my goodness, the pagans don't even treat their wives this bad. This guy comes along 14 centuries later. You know what? The pagan women, they just saw how great Muslim women have it. What with their green skin being beaten till their skin turned green by their husbands and so on. And then you have all the divine revelation saying you can beat your wives and plow your wives however you want because they're your tilth for sowing your seed. The pagan women just said, oh, wow, this is so great. Let's convert to this, even though no one's going to mention that we converted. And this is how they decide things. I mean, put it this way. Fareed should know better than this. Fareed should know better. So I don't know what in the world he's thinking here.
Yeah, I wonder if Fareed would also join this conversation and say, yeah, Islam was against misogyny. This other pagan group, they were very misogynistic. They treated women like possessions, whereas Islam came and gave women rights. In fact, Islam was very feminist. What in the world?
Muhammad was the greatest feminist of of the ancient world.
This is ridiculous, man. By the way,
it seems to be. I mean, really. I mean, it seems to be parallel to like how they treat Andrew Tate and Sneeko, in the sense that we don't want to actually tell you the truth right now because it's going to make you leave Islam, and therefore we'll let you keep up with your adorable little claims for a while.
Yeah, yeah. I was just looking up different sources, and I came across this completely unrelated, but I find it always funny. This hadith which says, "I was thinking of forbidding rila, which is having sex with a woman who is breastfeeding, until I remembered that it is done by the Persians and the Romans." So, and one of the narrators said, because he saw that it doesn't harm their children. So Muhammad is here, the legislator who comes in the mission, who is commissioned by Allah to deliver the divine law to the Muslims. He says, "I wanted to forbid this certain thing, but then I noticed that Persians and Romans are also doing it, and nothing really happens. So that's why I decided not to do it." What interesting, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting is if he had forbade it, if in other words, if he wasn't familiar with it not affecting Persians and Romans, then he would have forbade it, and then Muslims would say, "You see, this is from Allah," and it's clear because there are a bunch of passages.
It's a miracle.
Yeah, someone should put all of these passages together into a long video. All the passages where Muhammad's trying to come up with his ruling on something, and he gets something from the Jews. Or he gets something from some other group, the Persians or the Romans or something, because this happens a lot where I'm about to decide this. Oh, wait, what do the Romans do? Oh, okay. Yeah. Let's go with that one. And this is the guy who's supposedly, like divinely inspired.
Divinely inspired. Yeah. I mean, don't Muslims read this and think, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. How can he make laws? How can he forbid things or allow things explicitly because he sees other people doing it or not doing it in his own environment when he is supposed to just forbid and allow whatever Allah forbids and allows? That doesn't really make sense. Is he Allah, or are the Romans Allah? Are the Persians Allah? We will
starting to look like that. Starting to look like they're the true partners of Allah.
Yeah, terrible. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what actually happened, and not this narrative that he's just completely whitewashing the aggression of the other side and all the atrocities that they.
I'm not even saying anything. I'm just reading the source here.
Yeah, well, you're whitewashing everything by quoting the Muslim sources. Don't you know you're only supposed to listen to a Western convert who heard it from some book who supposedly cites scholars which can't, and yet we can't give any sources for it? Don't you know how things work in Islam?
Something very weird just happened to your sound, and you sounded like you were speaking to us from a different dimension.
Was it? Check.
But then it changed to normal again. I don't know if that was just me. I don't know if I'm high, or if this was if everybody just heard that, but that was very strange sound.
You're strange.
Probably against women. These women converted to Islam, and then they chose to have these relationships with the Muslims.
Can we get one source on that? At this point, he's stating it as fact, and we still have not seen a source for it. Now, by the way, notice if there was an actual Muslim source on it, wouldn't it be okay? Sunan Ibn Majah, number such and such. This is where this is what says it.
Yeah. People are saying that Jibreel or Satan is messing with the stream, but everybody uploaded it too. Yeah.
Allah has spoken.
Sarah said you are getting a revelation, AP. So yeah, that might be it too.
Women. This narrative that he's just completely whitewashing the aggression of the other side and all the atrocities that they actually did against women. These women converted to Islam, and then they chose to have these relationships with the Muslims.
They chose.
Oh my God, this is disgusting, man. I mean, it's one thing to just make up stuff, but it's another thing to sit there as this smug convert scholar who wants to come and school the Islamophobes who are lying about Islam, and then to sit there and be like, yeah, no, he's completely not mentioning the fact that these women were treated terribly by the pagans, and Islam came and it treated them so well that they willingly converted to Islam and offered themselves as sex partners to the Muslim captors. Where in the world are you getting this from?
Yeah, you're stating this as fact. We're saying we have no clue where you're getting this from. Like from as far as the Muslim sources are concerned. If you've read some book claiming this, that's great. But we can read Muslim books that say all kinds of things.
They wanted to be raped. They wanted to become Muslims. They wanted to be raped.
That's the other
thing.
Loved it. Notice that that's the parallel with Muhammad hijab. It's all these women are just waiting for Muslims to come along and then look, Muslims, they're so dreamy. And They're waiting to be conquered by the Muslims. It's like, dude, can you give us a source on that?
Please give
before you state it as fact.
Please give me a source. I mean, and then they sit down here and accuse me and others of making things
shame on
up,
you.
of twisting things, taking them out of context, not using sources. Seriously, man?
Notice you're the only one so far that's actually quoting sources, right?
I know. I know. By the way, small detail here. I believe certain anti-Muslim women would wish they lived in the medieval period, a period where if a war was won by the opposing side, it was conventional that people could be taken as booty.
Not in Islam.
Some historical accounts actually say some women would dress up for the capture. This is what Muhammad Hijab says. He thinks that certain anti-Muslim women actually want to be taken captives by wonderful, strong Muslims like himself. So, yeah. Source Muhammad Hijab's sexual fantasies. And yeah.
Are you saying that these marriages were annulled due to their conversion to Islam, or?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because their husbands were idolaters.
I see.
And
okay.
so because a Muslim woman cannot be married to an idolatrous man.
Right.
So marriage is
Then what was the question for?
Okay, but where
what
exactly?
was the question for? Do you see what I'm saying? It makes what he just said makes no sense. They're specifically coming and asking, "Hey, are we allowed to have sex with these women who are married to pagans?" And Allah's response, which totally contradicts what this dude just said, yes, you can have Muslim women as your sex slave. I mean, you can have women as your sex slave, not ordinarily, not if they're married, but yes, in this case, you can have married women become your sex slaves. Why? I mean, if Allah is saying, yes, you can have sex with these married women, and he's saying, no, their marriages were annulled. What's the question for, and what's Allah talking about? Allah says you can have sex with the married women. These guys are saying, no, that the marriages were annulled.
And notice, I mean, it is very clear, no matter who you are, no matter what you believe in, no matter what you think about, I mean, it's very, very clear that this guy here is twisting things and talking complete trash, because the hadith is here. He's commenting on this hadith. The hadith is here. It says that they got captives in this war. The Muslims came to, some of the companions of Apostle of Allah were reluctant to have relations with the female captives because of their pagan husbands. So Allah, the Exalted, sent down the Quranic verse, and all married women are forbidden unto you, save those, except those whom your right hand possess. So they are still married.
They're
to their
married.
polytheistic husbands. But Allah is making an exception here and saying they are your slaves. Even if they are still married, you can have sex with them. But here is this convert guy who is saying, yeah, no, what this was actually about is their marriages were no longer valid because they converted to Islam. Although no source says this, but I know this because somebody wrote a book about it once. And through their conversion to Islam, their marriages were annulled, so they were no longer married. Therefore, they could have sex. What are you talking about?
And why in the name of common sense is Fareed agreeing with this dude? Again,
because he's an idiot, because he just wants to agree with whatever his sidekick, whoever it is, says, whatever they say. He's dishonest.
Yeah. So, by the way, does everyone understand what we're saying about this making no sense? He's saying these women, once the Muslim army approached, the women said, "Oh, we're so sick of how abusive these guys are. We want this new feminist religion that supports us. And so we're going to convert to this wonderful feminist religion of Islam." And so their marriages are completely annulled because now they're Muslim women. The marriages are annulled, and now they can go be with Muslim men. That's all. That should all be straightforward. And yet the question that Muhammad's followers actually run up to Muhammad to ask is, hey, what about these women who are married to pagans? What are we supposed to do with them? And Allah's response is, of course you can have sex with these married women.
Okay.
So they're married. How have their marriages been annulled? If this guy's right,
I still don't understand why those people were asking Muhammad when they could have just asked this guy here.
Yeah. It should have asked him. They should have asked him. So he already knows more than Allah. because Allah said they're married, but this guy knows they weren't. He knows more than Muhammad because Muhammad responded by quoting the Quran, and he knows more than Aisha because he knows. Aisha said that Muslim women were treated worse than pagan women, but he says no. The Muslim women were treated so well in their feminist religion that pagan women are just converting by the tons. Pagan women are converting to Islam so they can get in on this feminist religion. It's like how delusional can you possibly be?
That makes complete sense. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. It's a fantastic understanding of Islam by this guy.
Powerful.
Trust him.
As a side note, the term used here,
I feel like Farid's face already is like he's not entirely comfortable with what is going on here, but he's just going along with it anyway.
Yeah, Farid's like, I certainly hope only my followers watch this and that David Wood and the apostate prophet do not eventually go through this and expose what liars I am.
Yeah. The right hands possess is a direct translation of the Arabic and
Yeah, so this is an interesting point. So if you go, we'll go to the Quran first, and you see that Allah commands ihsan towards the mamalakat aymanukum. I say these are those under the stewardship of your right hand. Allah says to treat them with ihsan, which is to treat them with the best way. And then if you go to the comments by Al-Qurtubi in his tafsir, he talks about how this phrase means.
Notice, I don't want to nitpick here, but there's absolutely no need to use the Arabic word here. You can just entirely explain the whole thing with English terms. There's literally no point at all in using the direct Arabic translation of whatever you're trying to say here, but whatever, man.
That you treat them with justice, you treat them with gentleness, and that the phrase conveys a sense of honor because the right hand is supposed to be honorable, right? So it's an expression, and it doesn't just mean slaves. It means people that were under the custodianship of your right hand, and that was tempering the language that they used to use, because they used to just call people slaves and treat people very poorly. But this language that the Quran uses was reversing that.
So I don't know if this is just so stupid. I mean, it just sounds like this guy is a traditional Muslim student who also tries to combine his understanding of traditional Islam with his futile attempts to make Islam look as cozy and nice and modern and loving toward women as possible. I do think that I have heard before the explanation that there is something honorable about the term "your right hand possess," but this is definitely not the most well-known understanding of what that means. The most well-known understanding of it is actually very simple. Your right hand possesses something. That means your hand rightfully possesses whatever it possesses that is yours. It could be an object, it could be a human, it could be an animal. That is your property. You own it. So that just means very simply what you own. Those people that you own. The Quran just uses it in such a term. And when I go through the sources of Islamic scholars who comment on the term "what your right hand possess," the dominant view is that that this is the Quran's way of describing your possession, slaves, what you own. But this guy is picking an idea that that might be an opinion, and then he immediately goes to that. He cherry picks that one and presents it to all of us to show, look, Islam is actually very nice. And then it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. This is just a very slimy way of whitewashing and sugarcoating something terrible, where he says, oh yeah, no, we do own them and they are our possessions and we can use them as we wish. But it is described in an honorable way. It's just slimy.
How about we read a few sources real quick?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Just so we have these in mind. I'll just pull them up. We'll just read them real quick. We don't need tons of commentary. I
got him here.
Coitus interruptus, ladies and gentlemen. That's Azel.
Yeah.
So that is when that's when you have sex, but then you pull out right before doing something that could impregnate a girl. So this is Sahih Muslim. Jabir reported, we used to practice azl during the lifetime of Allah's messenger. the news of this practice, reached Allah's apostle, and he did not forbid us. There are passages where he frowns upon it. He frowns upon it not because he is against having sex with slave girls and then, pulling out at the last second. His only objection to the practice is that you seem to be trying to control who's going to be born. And his view is any child who's going to be born has been destined by Allah to be born. And so you notice, by the way, this is massively unscientific. He thinks that whether you actually ejaculate inside a woman has nothing to do with whether she gets pregnant or not. Let's go ahead and read some of these. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, this is also Sahih Muslim. We took women captives and we wanted to do azl with them. We then asked Allah's messenger about it, and he said to us, verily you do it, verily you do it, verily you do it. But the soul which has to be born until the day of judgment must be born. So you are not actually stopping someone from being born if Allah destines a person to be born.
Yeah. I just want to quickly say, I am one of those people who is always annoyed by describing very easily understood things in Latin terms, in words that nobody uses. It's just very annoying.
You could say pulling out.
Yeah, so this is basically just talking about pulling out. Coitus interruptus literally means interrupting sexual intercourse, right? I think that's what it means. And also, yeah, that's basically the same thing. But this is just talking about. So the Muslims come, they have captives, they have sex with them, but then they pull out because they don't want they don't want children to result from these sexual interactions. And they say, "Hey, we are doing this. What do you think about this?" And he says, "You could pull out, or you could not pull out, but it does not matter because Allah decreed that a soul would be born into this world, and if Allah has decreed it, then it will be born even if you pull out. Don't ask me how; it just happens."
Yeah. I put up a couple more passages to you there in the chat. We can glance at these real quick, but this will help people understand. This should help everyone understand our confusion upon hearing what our Muslim friends here are talking about.
I am confusion. Let me open the
So
other one too, and then
Sunan Abu Dawud?
read all of them here. First, that's what this one.
All right, so Sunan Abu Dawud, narrated Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, a man said, "Messenger of Allah, I have a slave girl, and I withdraw the penis from her while having intercourse, and I dislike that she becomes pregnant." So he doesn't want her to become pregnant. And you can see why in some of these sources, these guys want to have sex with girls, especially ones they capture, and then want to sell them later on. And so they don't want them to become pregnant. I intend by intercourse what the men intend by it. Notice he doesn't want her to become pregnant. I intend what men intend by it. In other words, I want to have sex with her, but I don't want her to get pregnant. The Jews say that withdrawing the penis is burying the living girls on a small scale. He, the prophet, said, the Jews told a lie. If Allah intends to create it, you cannot turn it away. So we've talked in previous episodes about the practice of, if you had a daughter and you didn't want to take care of a daughter, you wanted sons, you just throw the daughter out to die. And Muhammad condemned this. And so people are pointing out that, hey, if you pull out your penis while having sex and you ejaculate on the ground, it's like you're doing it. It's like you're throwing away the girls on a small scale. It's like a small scale, right?
Yeah.
And Muhammad says, no, if Allah intends to create it, you cannot turn it away.
That is funny.
Interesting stuff. All right, so what do we have now? We have Sunan ibn Majah. It's narrated that Jabir said, a man from among the Ansar came to the Prophet and said, "O Messenger of Allah, I have a slave girl. Should I do azl, coitus interruptus, with her?" He said, "Whatever is decreed for her shall come to her." He, the Ansari, came to him on later on and said, "The slave girl has become pregnant." So he's practicing azl. She gets pregnant anyway. The Prophet said, "Nothing is decreed for a person, but it will surely come to pass." Or maybe he didn't practice azl because Muhammad said it has no effect on whether she gets pregnant, and then she got pregnant. Yeah. But anyway, the takeaway point here is azl is allowed. This guy's having sex with his slave girl. And why do they practice azl? Because they don't want the girls to get pregnant, because they want to sell them later.
By the way, legends say that even if you look at a woman that you are together with, she could get pregnant, because when Allah decrees it, then it happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's required. Two more real quick. Sahih. This is another one from Sahih Muslim. Jabir, man came and said, "I have a slave girl who is our servant, and she carries water for us, and I have intercourse with her. but I do not want her to conceive. He said, practice azl if you so like, but what is decreed for her will come about. The person stayed back for some time and then came and said, the girl has become pregnant, whereupon he said, I told you what was decreed for her would come to her. Muslim pull-out games is so weak, Allah can make a baby even when you pull out.
Yeah.
All right, one more here. Abu Surma said to Abu Sa'id al-Qadri, oh, Abu Sa'id, did you hear Allah's messenger mentioning al-Azl? He said, yes, and added, we went out with Allah's messenger on the expedition to Bil Mustalik, Bani al-Mustalik, and took captive some excellent Arab women, these are pagans, and we desired them, for we were suffering from the absence of our wives. But at the same time, we also desired ransom for them. You catch it, ladies and gentlemen? We want to have sex with these women. We are not taking them as our wives. We're just absent from our wives. We want to get paid for these women to go back to their tribe. We want money, but we want to have sex with them now. So they are intending to ransom these women. They're intending to give them back, to sell them back. But we decided to have sexual intercourse with them, but by practicing azl, withdrawing the male sexual organ before emission of semen to avoid conception. But we said we are doing an act, whereas Allah's messenger is amongst us. Why not ask him? So we asked Allah's messenger, and he said, it does not matter if you do not do it, pulling out. For every soul that is to be born up to the day of resurrection will be born. Notice, these are guys, they captured pagan women. They're having sex with the pagan women, but they want to sell the pagan women back. Wait, I thought these women, well, maybe these women were converts. They saw the power of the Muslim men and they wanted to convert. Why are you giving them back to their pagan tribe then, if these women had converted? And they asked Muhammad, hey, what about having sex with them while pulling our penises out so we don't get them pregnant, so we can, have sex with them for a while and then sell them back? And then his only objection is to them thinking that they're controlling who's born and who's not. There's no, what are you talking about? You're not allowed to have sex with women. You're not allowed to have sex with, these are pagan women. And 14 centuries from now, Farid and this other dude are going to say this isn't allowed in Islam. And you know that they define Islam, not Allah and me. And this is like insane. These passages, I just pulled up a handful of them. We went through them. These passages are all over the hadiths. What are these guys reading that they think Islam doesn't allow any of this?
Well, Farid and his friend know best. So there's that.
They certainly do.
It said a Muslim can have sex with his female slave. Some moderate Muslims take a hadith and try to explain that it's actually not allowed. It is one specific hadith.
Did you hear how I pronounced allowed back then? I'm terrible.
Which explains that.
Oh, your pronunciations always suck. I remember like 8 times I heard you say conquered.
Yeah, I sometimes still say it. Conquer.
Yeah, conquered. The Muslims came in and conquered their enemy, because that's how it's spelled, right?
Yeah,
that's exactly how it's spelled. But
I learned most of the words that I learned from reading them, not from speaking them. So
that is that. Just so everyone knows, that is the response. It's when you hear someone mispronounce a word, don't make fun of him, because he probably got that from reading, right? And that's good. So it should be okay.
Yeah.
His wife's female slave, and that Muhammad ordered to punish him. That's very dirty, because the hadith talks about a man having sex with
That's very dirty.
Okay, I'm really glad that he brought this up, because this actually explains the issue pretty well, especially Moklin's comments on it. So if you look at the narration of Salama, when this happened, the Prophet ﷺ heard that this man had sex with his wife's slave. And he ﷺ said in this narration that he has to pay for the slave. But if he had forced her, means if he had forced sex upon her, then the slave is free and he has to pay the fine. Okay. So follow my logic here. So if he had consensual sex with that slave, he has to pay the fine. If he had forced sex with that slave, she goes free to pay the fine. Okay, so that shows you that the forcing of sex onto the slave is something that's wrong in itself. If X is bad and X plus Y is worse, then Y is bad.
No, it does not at all. I don't know if people could follow what he actually said, but what he says, let me pull up the narration actually. This is about, I think I had it open here before. But so the source that I mentioned is that a man has sex with his wife's slave, and it is then said that if he forced her, he's supposed to wait. Let me pull this up here. David, is there anything you want to say quickly before I?
No,
pull
I
this up?
just that we apologize to everyone for this being complete amateur hour yet again.
Yeah,
While
yeah,
AP is looking up random sources.
yeah, terrible stuff.
And just keep in mind, everyone, we are totally willing to be proven wrong in all of this. If we're somehow missing something, and all we got passage after passage after passage after passage after passage about taking women captive, having sex with them, and wanting to sell them back, not wanting them to get pregnant, and so on. You got passages in the Quran about having sex with those whom your right hands possess. In a bunch of these battles, these were pagan women. Suddenly we get down to these guys. Nope, can't have sex with a slave girl who's a pagan, and that's why ISIS is wrong.
So here is the narration that we are talking about. It says, it was narrated from this and this guy that the Prophet said concerning a man who had intercourse with his wife's slave woman.
Wife's slave woman.
Yeah. If she let him do that, I will flog him with 100 stripes, and if she did not let him, I will stone him. But this is just one version. According to the others, it says, for example, here, with his wife's slave woman, if he forced her, then she is free, and he has to give her mistress a similar slave as a replacement. If she obeyed him in that, then she belongs to him, and he has to give her mistress a similar slave as a replacement. So what is happening here is that this guy is having sex with a slave that he himself does not own, but that his wife actually owns. So that is her slave and does whatever the wife wants, and he goes and has sex with her. And then the question is, did he force her to have sex, or did the slave go along with it and allow it and just consensually had sex with him? Depending on what is the case, he will receive a punishment, or he will keep or give the slave. Now, this very smart, very intelligent guy here, who is a convert to Islam by the name of Abu Amin al something. He said, I don't know, whatever. He says, from this here, we can understand that rape alone is already wrong, because in the case of rape, he would be punished. And that just shows us that rape is always bad and it's not allowed. But that's not what is being what you can logically take from here. What you can take from here is that it is wrong for a man to have sex with his wife's slave. And then in that case, was she actually complicit? Was the slave complicit in doing that? Or did he force himself upon that slave girl? The one that he is not allowed to have sex with. This is not about whether rape is bad or not. It is about whether they both collaborated in doing something bad, or whether he forced himself upon her and raped her. That is the case. That is the issue here. This does not in any way say anything about whether rape is good or bad. So his conclusion here, which he tries to obtain through logic, is not a logical conclusion. It has nothing to do with rape at all. And this is just about having sex with a slave that you yourself do not own.
Yeah, I think this dude, I don't know. I don't know. I can't even tell if he's being serious at this point or not.
What's funny? You know what's funny?
What?
I bring this up in the original video specifically because people like this guy use this hadith to argue that rape is wrong. And what does he do? He does exactly that. I listen to this.
Mm-hmm.
This man had custodianship, and that was
his female slave. Some moderate Muslims take a hadith and try to explain that it's actually not allowed. It is one specific hadith which explains that a man had sex with his wife's female slave and that Muhammad ordered to punish him. That's very dirty, because the hadith talks about a man having sex with his wife.
Look, I specifically mentioned this to point out that people use this specific hadith to make a point which is not the point of the hadith, to argue that it is wrong to have sex with your slave. This guy then makes a modification of that same defense and says this hadith actually shows that rape is bad, but he's basically doing the same thing.
Okay, I'm really glad that he brought this up because this actually explains the issue pretty well, especially Moklay's comments on it. So if you look at the narration of Salama, when this happened, the Prophet ﷺ heard that this man had sex with his wife's slave. And he ﷺ said in this narration that he has to pay for the slave. But if he had forced her, means if he had forced sex upon her, then the slave is free and he has to pay the fine. Okay, so follow my logic here. So if he had consensual sex with that slave, he has to pay the fine. If he had forced sex with that slave, she goes free to pay the fine. Okay, so that shows you that the forcing of sex onto the slave is something that's wrong in itself.
Yeah,
Not at all.
He's missing the entire point. That is not a woman your right hand possesses. That's a woman that your wife as her property. She has property. She bought that slave. She has, and they do draw distinctions between the property of a wife or the slave girl of a wife and the slave girl of a husband. So that was not a woman that his right hands possess. If it had been his slave girl, there would have been no dispute. The entire dispute arises because it's not his slave girl; it's his wife's slave girl.
That's the whole point here. That is the whole point. And then is it that he himself forced himself on his wife's slave, or did she actually participate in that specific illegal act? It is the act that is illegal, and what needs to be established is, did he himself only do that by force, or did they do that together? So has nothing to do with whether rape is allowed or not. I don't understand how he can bring logic into this and then completely miss a very simple point of this whole narration here. Very funny.
X is bad and X plus Y is worse, then Y is bad. Okay, I hope you follow my logic there. But Ibn al-Qayyim, he has some really good comments here on this. And he mentions, and he says, وَأَمَا إِذَا اسْتَكْرَهَهَا فَإِنَّ هَذَا مِنْ بَابِ الْمُثْلَى. He says,
see, you got that?
Yeah, now it all makes sense.
Yeah, not everybody, yeah, fair point.
If he had forced her, meaning into this intercourse, then this is a type of muthla, this is a type of mutilation, right? فَإِنَّ الْإِكْرَاهَ عَلَى الْوَطْءِ muthla. He said, إِكْرَاهَ عَلَى الْوَطْءِ muthla. Okay, the forcing into intercourse is an act of mutilation, and then he says it's jinaya. It's a criminal offense, and then it deserves a fine or a punishment. Okay, so that's very explicit there, that you're just not allowed to go and just rape your slaves just like that.
Wrong. You can't
Nothing.
rape. You can't rape someone else's slave. AP, do we grant that in Islam you are not allowed to rape someone else's slave? I grant
100%.
that.
100%.
I grant that. That's not your property. That's someone else's property. The entire discussion we're trying to have is: does your own slave have a right to forbid and to say no? And nothing these guys are saying indicates otherwise.
I mean, this guy is actually quoting a source in which the scholar explains it and says, if you go and rape a slave that does not belong to you, then this is a very severe crime. And he then says, this shows that you cannot rape your own slaves, which has not been said in any of the sources that you cited, which is not said in any source at all. So how could you be, I don't understand. You have to be either very dishonest to do this, or you just don't understand what you're reading. Something very simple, which should be very obvious to understand. Or is he just willfully ignoring the actual point and then reading into it because he just wants to believe that Islam, is so caring about women and their rights and stuff like that? I don't even understand it. But how can he be so obviously, publicly blind and dishonest? It's strange, man.
It is weird. I mean, think about how easy this should be. He's saying that you're not allowed to have your way with your slave girl unless she gives her consent first, which flies in the face of everything we've ever known about Islam. But then when we say, hey, what's the source? He gives a source that has zero to do with anything, right? But I will prove to you that you can't rape someone else's slave. Oh, great. That's not what we were talking about.
Yeah, nobody actually cares. And yeah, that's probably quite nice, but nobody cares, you know.
He said that forcing the slave into sex is an act of mutilation. There's many ways that slaves could be set free, and then the only way that slaves could be acquired was as prisoners of war. And then even the Prophet ﷺ encouraged their freedom. So what is happening here is he's restricting the source of slavery, and he's expanding the ways of emancipation. And so
I don't even understand what this whole argument is about. They say Islam actually restricts the ways of enslaving people. It restricts them to only taking prisoners of war, and turning them into slaves, or, by the way, buying and selling slaves. Here you can see
how else would you get slave? Either by conquering or by buying. I don't know how else you even get slaves.
What is the point of this argument?
How did non-Muslims ever get slaves? If you think there are all these additional methods, I don't know.
They will say, well, look, Islam is so merciful that it doesn't even allow you to turn a random person in the street into a slave. See, Islam is very, very, very merciful, and it really limits the channels of slavery. What are you talking about?
And there was a third way to get slaves. If your slave had children, then those are your slaves as well. So
yeah.
You have all the normal ways of getting slaves are all completely halal in Islam.
This is just a completely intellectually dishonest way of arguing for how Islam is good, by saying, oh, Islam limits the channels of slavery. And then you describe how every civilization that had slavery in history actually acquired slavery. That's it's idiotic.
Think about that over time. That's going to lead to abolition, and that's what happened.
What is also quite
so his argument is that
what's going to lead to abolition? That
the fact that Muhammad encouraged the freeing of slaves for several things. By his logic, if freeing slaves in exchange for certain things leads to the abolition eventually of slaves, by that logic, giving up goods also eventually leads to the abolition of possessions, of money, for example, altogether. That's stupid. It's nonsense.
That's idiotic. That's one of the most idiotic things I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, I can make a rule and say, hey, if we fight people, we will take their people as slaves. But if you do certain things, if you commit a crime, like, I don't know, kill somebody, then you can pay for that by freeing so many of your slaves, letting go of them, or by giving your slaves to somebody else. That does not mean I am ending slavery. That means I am simply using slaves as a currency to free yourself from certain guilds. Just as well, I could tell you, you can have all of the money that you get from your enemies, but if you commit such a crime, then you have to pay so much money in return in order to absolve yourself from your crimes. That does not mean I am against the possession of money. It's so simple, man. This is
weird stuff. People have always freed slaves under various circumstances and so on. It doesn't mean like Greeks and Romans would free slaves under certain circumstances. I mean, Epictetus, one of my favorite Stoic philosopher, he was a freed slave. He started studying philosophy, and his master said, "Hey, cool, let's just go." And he started his own school of philosophy and so on. Therefore, the Romans ended slavery. What in the world would you be talking about, right? No, just because they, I don't know what this guy's talking about.
There's even there's a funny thing in a different video, I think, where I talked about slavery. I actually mentioned that, and I mentioned that in contemporary cultures, in the Roman Empire and the Sassanid Empire, they had similar laws about freeing slaves and treating slaves well, and so on. And in the Roman Empire, they, under the Romans, before Islam, they at some point instated a law which regulated the freeing of slaves, because people were freeing slaves left and right, and the society was getting full of people who are meant to be slaves, but who are freed by their masters. He then responded to that by saying, "Oh, look, he's even saying that the Romans made a law regulating the freeing of slaves. This just shows that Islam was beautiful because Islam did not make such a law." But these people are weird, man. These people are strange.
This is indeed weird stuff.
Disturbing about all of this is one of the final points that ISIS made in that pamphlet, and it's totally in accordance with Islam. According to Islam, a slave can be offered freedom for 2 reasons. Now,
Okay, that's not actually true, because you could just free slaves. You don't even have to do that. There's a reward for just freeing the slaves. Let me bring.
The pamphlet said that slaves can be freed through marriage and conversion. Not sure what exactly I said in the fullest, because they chop and crop it all. But I'm pretty sure that the implication here is not that slaves can only be freed under these circumstances. Not sure if I ever said that, but yeah, that's not the point.
Bring the hadith right here. I'll just give me a second. So Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Wafakku al-ani," set the captives free. Set the captives free. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is making this general statement about freeing the captives, right? And there's a reward for that. There's also another hadith that the man who has a slave girl and he educates her and he treats her in the best way, then he sets her free, and then he marries her and he has a double reward. The reward for raising her and the reward for freeing her and marrying her, right?
And what exactly does it mean? Okay, that's very nice, very cute, but okay. Does that mean Islam is somehow, totally for a society where slavery doesn't exist anymore? No. Even if this is the case, that just means that in Islam, doing something good with those captives that you take from your enemies and then turn into possessions is considered nice. All right, okay. Does this mean that you still cannot declare war and take captives as slaves? No. Does this mean that you are supposed to eventually get rid of all slaves? You're supposed to free them all? No. Does this mean you cannot have non-consensual sex with your slaves? No. It doesn't mean any of these things. This is a fallacy, and it is idiotic. This is saying, "Oh yeah, we know all of these things, but hey, let me tell you something nice." It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I mean, my confusion is like, when is he saying this actually happened? That that Islam, like Muslims globally, just woke up one day and said, "Oh, slavery's wrong." It's like, again, 1962, under pressure from the United Nations and the United States of America, Saudi Arabia abolished slavery. I mean, up until then, they were still showing up to places with their African slaves. So it's like, when is he concluding that, Muslims decided, oh, slavery's wrong because of these awesome teachings? It's like he's living in a world where slavery has officially been abolished and thinking that Islam just decided that along the way, instead of Islam being compelled to do. In fact, isn't that one of the objections of people like Daniel, that these rules are being imposed from Westerners are imposing their rules on Islam? This would be an example of that.
Yeah. This is why Daniel the Kikuchu, for example, when he argues for slavery and sex slavery, he basically says that considering slavery as out of as not acceptable in today's time would be rejecting Islamic values and adopting modern or Western values, and thereby getting rid of something that Islam actually promotes and contributing to the decline and demise of Islam. This is what Daniel Kikuchu, for example, says. And I'm pretty sure Fareed sat there and applauded Daniel Kikuchu in his debates where he argued for such things, or even made videos in support of Daniel Kikuchu after those debates. So it's quite slimy that he sits here together with somebody who has a complete revisionist view of Islamic slavery, but on the other hand, he himself does not actually believe that slavery has been abolished by Islam. And he even sides with others who are completely for slavery in modern times. Terrible, terrible,
Powerful dawah.
absolutely powerful.
So he is, acting like this is the only route for freedom for these people, and that's just not true at all. And the Quran does.
Now, here's the funny thing. I just went to my actual video, which they're responding to. What I said there is, ISIS says at the end of the pamphlet that slaves can be freed for two reasons: for marrying them, or if they convert to Islam. He then responds to me and says this is actually false because the freeing of slaves includes many reasons, and slaves.
You're saying what ISIS said.
Yeah, I'm saying what ISIS said,
and then
I'm
he's
actually
destroying you for repeating what ISIS said.
Yeah, and I'm actually making the argument there and saying ISIS lists marriage and conversion as reasons to free slaves, and then I go on in the video and basically say this. Let me actually play what I'm actually saying here. This is terrible.
Nice pajamas, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
No sound.
And it's totally in accordance with Islam. According to Islam, a slave can be offered freedom for two reasons: marrying them and conversion.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I said Islam.
Shame on you.
I did say Islam. Okay, I take that back. That was on me.
Yeah.
But again, that doesn't mean that this is limited to those two things, right?
Now think about freedom for two accordance with Islam. According to Islam, a slave can be offered freedom for two reasons.
Okay, but why did I say at the end of the pamphlet? So ISIS says that it's okay to beat them as long as it's only for disciplining. What is also quite disturbing about all of this is one of the final points that, it is about one of the final points. So
that's why ISIS says that it's okay to beat them as long as it's only for discipline. What is also quite disturbing about all of this is one of the final points that ISIS made in that pamphlet. And it's
I am describing the points that ISIS made in that pamphlet, and at the end of the pamphlet, ISIS makes the point that the slaves can be freed according to Islamic law through marriage
totally in accordance with Islam. According to Islam, a slave can be offered freedom for two reasons: marrying them and conversion.
Okay, now I see why he would react like this to that. What I'm doing here is I'm addressing the ISIS pamphlet, at the end of which they count these two reasons to free a slave. But I also say, according to Islam, slaves can be freed for two reasons. I must say, when I listen to this now, it looks like I am actually misrepresenting how you free slaves in Islam. Would you agree with that?
AP admits he lied about Islam. That's your title, guys. And by the way, notice it's like they can make 50,000 false claims in a row, but as soon as you're talking about an ISIS pamphlet, but you say Islam in the context of discussing an ISIS pamphlet, and you say this is why you could never trust him ever again.
Yeah, no, but I agree with that. Actually, if you listen to this just like this, when I listen to it now, it does sound a bit problematic, and you could argue that what I'm saying is that this is according to Islam. That according to Islam, you can free slaves for two reasons. Although I did not say that these are the only reasons, and I did also explain in the video and in previous videos that you can free them for, to absolve yourself from sins or crimes, or just because you want to. But yeah, fair point. This does sound a little bit problematic. But the point that I was actually making here is...
Now think about that a bit deeper. No one wants to be a slave, especially not the sex slave of some desert warlord who invents divine verses in his mind.
You do sound very different, man.
Freedom through marriage.
I know. I sound.
I'm wondering what you're going to sound like 5 years from now. You might sound like totally different. You're like, "Hello, everyone. This is the Apostate Prophet."
Well, I was also using a different microphone that was kind of making my voice sound kind of different from what I have right now. Like right now, I have a more accurate representation of what I actually sound like.
And then you got your hair looking like Johnny Bravo or whoever.
You're offering them something that they probably don't really want, but also something that they probably shouldn't refuse. But Muhammad doesn't really care about the consent of women in general anyway.
Okay, so the point that I'm making here in the video is basically that ISIS adds two conditions under which slaves can be freed. which are marriage and conversion. And think about it: if you are a slave and you are offered two paths of freeing yourself from slavery, which are converting to Islam or getting married, you will probably be in that state okay with accepting these two either of these two conditions in order to become a free person. So,
by the way, I'm impressed. You got about 200,000 views on a video with just you in front of a sheet, wearing your pajamas.
I know,
and your messed up vape voice, and your ridiculous Turkish German hybrid accent that no one can understand, and you don't know how to say any words, and you're making all these horrible blunders saying, there are only two possible reasons to free a slave in Islam, and you still get 200,000 views. That means that people, at the end of the day, people just like the information you're presenting.
Or people just follow me and they don't even know why. I don't know.
Yep.
Maybe that's
weird.
That's the case. I don't know. We will never know.
Encourage the slaves to get married and to convert to Islam, and that's all good for them, because again, they were living in an idolatrous culture that was misogynistic, that buried their baby girls alive, and they treated women as property, and they inherited women.
I really wonder how all those women came into existence when they were constantly being buried as children, in that terribly misogynistic society. By the way, I have read historical accounts of quite a few people, I think, who argued that the whole burying your children is hugely blown out of proportion by Muslims. That it is most likely an exaggeration. I think I even talked to Robert Hoyland about this, and I asked him, and he also said that there is no way of knowing whether this was common practice, although it was, and the whole practice of female infanticide did exist in pre-Islamic cultures and in pagan cultures around the world. It was motivated by people not being able to take care of children. So they are incredibly poor, they can barely get anything. They have a daughter and they think, this daughter is going to suffer and she will not be of any use for us. We need a boy. So they bury the girls. But there is no source, no actual evidence that this was extremely common and that the pre-Islamic polytheists would do that in very high numbers or anything like that. And this also conflicts with the whole idea that Muslims also present, which is that the pre-Islamic era polytheists used to take unlimited numbers of wives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem, if they're killing all their girls, then there shouldn't be all these, because that's also a defense of polygamy in Islam. It's like, and they say, oh, but they had to because there were so few men and so many women. It's like, wait, why were there so many women if all the women are being tossed out in the desert to die when they're babies? This dude did just complain that among the pagans you would inherit slaves and so on. Let me read a passage from Ibn Taymiyyah. So the question that was asked to Ibn Taymiyyah, a man married a maid slave who bore him a child. Interesting. Would that child be free or would he be an owned slave? And Ibn Taymiyyah said, her child whom she bore from him would be the property of her master. So this is actually her child, but he's saying that the child would be a slave, just because it's the child of a slave. Her child whom she bore from him would be the property of her master, according to all the imams, the heads of the 4 Islamic schools of law, because the child follows the status of his mother in freedom or slavery. So whatever your mom is, that's what you are. If your mom's free, then you're free. If your mom's a slave, you're a slave.
Yeah. Whatever your mom is. You are whatever your mom is.
Your mom's such a slave. You are too. In Islam. Welcome to Islam.
To other men and things like that. So this is the culture that those women were fleeing to Islam, which honored.
Fleeing.
Like, where's he getting this from? It's some book that he mentioned, and he hasn't been able to give us a single source, and every source he gives us is completely misrepresented. This is weird.
This is so funny. He's talking about women who are taken as captives as a result of a war, and he's describing them as fleeing from their own culture.
Yeah, they're running, man. They're running from it. They're running into the arms of Muslims. Again,
The delusion.
This happened multiple times, but in the one we were talking about earlier, the reason the women and children were there was not because they're running out to flee. It's because these tribes had a practice of bringing their wives and kids with them so that they would stand their ground at all costs.
No, they were running. They were running because they were being mistreated by this misogynistic culture where Islam.
Yeah, the women were running out. They said, "Yay, we too want to be beaten until our skin turned green."
Them and gave them rights. Alhamdulillah.
But Muhammad doesn't really care about the consent of women in general anyway.
I must say that Farid is I don't know how he would describe that, but it looks like the whole time through half of the half of this stream here, he is sitting there not really comfortable with what is being said by the other guy.
He can't be. He knows this is nonsense.
But he also doesn't want to say anything. I mean, his face just gives off this whatever vibe, but he doesn't want to say anything.
Yeah, his face gives off the actually AP's totally right here, but he's still going against Islam, so I have to oppose him.
Yeah, terrible. Wow.
Since these are also his words, her silence is her consent.
I think this is interesting because this hadith is one of the strongest proofs against forced marriage, because what the Prophet ﷺ said prior to this is that the woman has to consent to her marriage.
Right.
So you're not just allowed to force people into marriage.
Right.
And some women were shy and they wouldn't speak up, and that's why he said this. But it's really funny. Not funny. It's ironic that he's citing this hadith, and it just proves the exact opposite of it.
And now look up if I ever made a video in which I said Islam forces women into marriage. Women have no choice. Forced marriage is an Islamic phenomenon that was established by the fundamentals of Islam. I haven't done that. So why in the world are you using this and saying that this is ironic because this is proof that consent is required in Islam, when I had never made such a claim, when I never argued otherwise? Why are you just thinking some people say this, so I guess he must be saying this too, and this hadith actually disproves him? Why would you do this? This is so dumb.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. These are, I mean, how does silence mean? Notice, I mean, try to use this in a court of law. Your Honor, this woman was totally unconscious when I boned her, and she didn't say no.
Look at this.
She didn't say no.
Well, this is the hadith that we are talking about, the hadith in question, which says, narrated by Aisha, I asked the Prophet, O Allah's Messenger, should the woman be asked for their consent to their marriage? He said, yes. I said, a virgin, if asked, feels shy and keeps quiet. Maybe she was talking about herself. And he said, her silence means her consent. So you want to marry?
Yeah. Let's say one of these Dawa guys wants to marry the 6-year-old daughter of another Dawa guy. And so he goes up and says, hey, I want to marry your daughter. According to them, if you go up and say, hey, little girl, little 6-year-old, this guy is going to be your husband, and she just sits there stunned, that means she has consented and he can then bone her. Yeah. Or in the case of Daniel Hakikachu, where if a girl reaches precocious puberty as an 11-month-old, if she happens to get parental consent, because that was his only obstacle there, was whether her parents are going to agree, then you could ask this 11-month-old baby, hey, baby, do you consent? Your parents say it's okay. And then the baby will only say goo goo gaga, which can't be interpreted as anything denying it. And therefore, the baby would be consenting. Like, isn't this weird stuff? If a girl is just stunned and has no clue what you're talking about, because I mean, a little 6-year-old girl doesn't know anything about sex or what's coming and stuff like that, and she just hears, "Oh, your prophet says he wants you as a wife." I don't know what in the world you're talking about, but you see, you've consented.
Yeah.
Notice it's in Islam. It's understood, one, that even little girls, a 6-year-old, is capable of consent to sex and marriage and all this stuff. And two, that if she doesn't even say, yes, I agree, if she just keeps her mouth shut because her dad said, hey, keep your mouth shut, that's consent.
Yeah. So you are proposing to a 3-year-old girl or a 2-year-old girl, And the dad said, you don't say anything, you're quiet. So the guy comes and says, hey, do you want to marry me? And the girl is just like, then that means, yes, you see, she consented. Congratulations. You will get married as soon as possible. And with that in mind, I want to bring up this wonderful person here who sheds light on the issue of consent and also on sex slavery, by the way. Oh, I don't have that part actually. But there is another part where he describes sex slavery. Let me inspiring philosophy. Let us see what inspiring philosophy posted about this. Pretty sure he made some clips of specifically that part.
Man, he makes a lot of shocking admission from Muslim on sex with minors. It looks like he made a ton of shorts.
Could a man have a marriage to a 5-year-old consummated if she started precocious puberty?
If she starts showing signs of physical maturity, then yes, that's permissible, as I stated. That's
what about
the
age
principle.
4?
If there are signs
3.
So this is something that becomes biologically impossible because precocious
I have
puberty,
a study
there are
that shows
no...
it goes as early as 11 months.
All right, well, that's something that the parents would not. The marriage is that parents are involved at these ages, and then you look at the marriage of the Prophet, peace be upon him, to Aisha.
The overlay.
Her parents were involved, and so she was not living with the Prophet, peace be upon him, even though she was married to him. So the parents have oversight, and sometimes a qadi or a judge can have oversight if the guardians are not capable to make sure that the rights and the physical well-being of a child are not, or a minor, are not harmed by that marriage. What? Because if you can start fertilizing a female as soon as she's showing signs of an imminent fertility, the period, menarche, then that will maximize because you secured the female right at the beginning, the start of when she will potentially.
But you can still have sex before you start maximizing fertility, right?
When the body is physically mature, according to Islamic law.
Do you know what precocious puberty is?
Okay, so I'm looking for a specific part where he actually talks about slavery, but taking a slave as taking a 5-year-old as sex slave, and Daniel says it's okay. But yeah, I don't have that part.
It is pretty insane there. He's talking about, sort of pouncing on them as soon as they show signs of fertility, and inspiring philosophy points out that an 11-month-old can reach precocious puberty, where she gets puberty as an 11-month-old. And Daniel's only response is, well, but in theory it would be fine, but her parents probably wouldn't allow that sort of thing. So if you had parents who say it's okay, you could actually be having sex with a pubescent. Keep in mind, guys, as sick as this sounds, the Quran allows sex with prepubescents, and Muhammad had sex with Aisha when she was prepubescent. So Daniel, as disgusting as this is even better than his God and his prophet. But even according to his much better version of Islam, you could be having sex with an 11-month-old trying to get the 11-month-old pregnant. Yeah. You could be having sex with an 11-month-old baby trying to get that baby pregnant with another baby. This is wild stuff, man.
And here's this part that I'm actually wanting to look at.
Well-being of a child or a minor are not harmed by that marriage.
What about, because you've tried to justify sexual slavery after a war. So what if a man finds a 7-year-old, let's say, started her period? Could he take her back as a sex slave?
So that's a whole different debate on slavery and concubinage.
I'm just talking about the minor aspect. Would that be fine?
Yeah, so if a girl is any age, she can be taken as
a sex slave, right?
Yeah, as opposed to being left to die after war.
So women can't take care of themselves. They would need to be taken by the men because they're too capable of caring for themselves.
Only about 10 seconds left.
Yeah, a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old.
Not talking about the women and the children.
Yeah, this is the topic of sex slavery, which is also endorsed in the Old Testament and practiced by Moses and other prophets like Joshua. So that is a practice found within the Bible. It's found within Islam, within the Quran, and it's practiced, again, universally.
And yeah, of course, this is very, you can find this laid out in the Bible. You can find this in all of the scriptures. You can find this in all the books that have ever existed in the world, in all the religions. You just have to kind of, read and tweak and twist and read something into it, and you will quickly get the very same thing which Islam allows you, which is explicitly you can take the women as sex slaves no matter how old they are. Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that.
In the Old Testament, you had to marry a captive if you were going to have sex with her. Not that everyone did that, but that was the legal requirement. You had to marry her.
Uh-huh. But yeah, you heard it. If you find a 7-year-old or a 4-year-old on the battlefield after you have defeated the opposing enemy, and you see that they are having signs of early puberty, it's fine. Just take them home, make them your slaves, and you can have sex with them. That's what Daniel Kikuchu says. Even a 4-year-old or a 7-year-old, as they have just mentioned. It's not what I'm saying. This is what the Muslim apologist with the Predator on his laptop is saying. So, man, looks quite.
Think about the irony. I mean, that dude literally could have got any laptop in the world. He went with the one that says Predator on it. And I'm guessing it's not because he's a big fan of the movie Predator.
No. I don't know.
He's trying to prove. And can we just appreciate how heinous this claim is that he's making, that the religion of a fourth of humanity is a religion that's built upon rape and sex slavery? I mean, that's just so heinous and crazy. Let's not lose sight of the fact that that's just really a terrible.
Yeah, if a fourth of humanity believe in this, and you complain about things like sex slavery in Islam and all the stuff that ISIS is doing and all the stuff that's been going on for 14 centuries, and what's next? Are you going to complain about wife beating when a fourth of the world believes in Islam? How dare you?
Terrible.
Hey, the next thing you'll be telling us that you have a problem with Islamic death penalty for apostasy. I mean, come on! You object to being slaughtered in the name of Allah when a fourth of the world's population believes in this? Shame on you!
Terrible.
Shame on you objecting to this when so many people. Just imagine if you applied that to Islam, right? Like all these Jews and Christians are the worst of creatures. Like, what? You're saying that? Christians, the biggest group in the world, is the worst of creatures? Shame on you! And don't what you're complaining about the doctrine of the Trinity? You know that's what the biggest religion in the world teaches. Shame on you! Like who thinks like this except in defense of Islam?
You complain about Jews saying Ezra is the son of Allah. How could you possibly suggest that such a large religious group that existed for so long believes in something so? Oh, wait a minute! Nobody actually believes.
You're complaining about Jews when not one of them ever said this. Yeah. No. By the way, notice these dudes like they flip out. They flip out when you say, "Hey, Islam says you can free a slave for these 2 reasons." But there's another one you didn't mention in your discussion of this ISIS pamphlet. But when their own God says the Trinity is made up of Allah, Jesus, and Mary, and Jews say that Ezra is the son of Allah, and Jews actually worship Ezra as the son of Allah. They got zero problem with it, no problem whatsoever with their God and their prophet. Now, notice, if they were talking about you, right? If they're talking about you, AP said there are these 2 things, but we've got another one. We've got another one beyond those 2 reasons for freeing a slave. That's a reason that you should be disgraced. But I mean, think about it. You're a human being. You're a mere human being. According to them, Allah Almighty and his final prophet can say things that are completely factually false, and they have zero problem with it. That is, I don't know. I find this stuff fascinating.
And I just want to bring this up here because we have talked about this abundantly. The Quran makes this false claim that Jews say Ezra is the son of Allah in chapter 9, verse 30. Muslims then go around in response to that and say, that is only in reference to certain Jews. And this is just, something that was applied to Jews in the environment and all of that. which is very strange because the Quran just talks plainly about Christians who, yes, do believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and then talks about Jews and says they believe Ezra is the Son of God, which is obviously wrong. But then you have a hadith here in which this is a very long hadith. I also made a video on this before, but Muhammad actually describes what will happen on the day of resurrection when Allah raises all the people and judges them. It talks about Christians at some point and says the Christians will be called upon and it will be said to them, who do you used to worship? And they will say, we used to worship Jesus, the Son of Allah. It will be said to them, you are liars, for Allah has never taken a wife or a son. So they will be punished for this. And notice what it then does here. It talks about the Jews. It says, the Jews will be called upon, and it will be said to them, who did you used to worship? They will say, we used to worship Ezra, the son of Allah. It will be said to them, you are liars, for Allah has never taken anyone as a wife or a son. What do you want now? So they will be eventually punished for this. So in this hadith, it is quite clear that Muhammad is talking about these two groups, Christians and Jews, and the Christians will obviously be judged and punished for their belief that Jesus is God and Jesus is the Son of Allah, whereas the Jews will be punished for believing that Ezra is the Son of Allah and he is God. And no Jew has ever held such a belief in the world. Muhammad got this completely wrong.
Yeah, this is, I mean, the reason this is interesting and such a massive problem is when you read in the Quran that the Jews say Ezra is the son of Allah and the Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah, it's acting like these are standard positions for Jews and Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And when you bring this up to Muslims, their response is, because you point out, hey, wait a minute, we have no record anywhere of any Jews ever saying this. Their response is maybe there was some long lost Jew, even an individual. I think Shabir Ali, Shabir Ali, who was he quoting? Maybe Tabari or something like that. But he said this could have even referred to one guy, right? I think that was Shabir. I think that was about this. I'm trying to think, was that in regard to a different objection or something like that? But anyway, it's okay. Maybe there's some long lost group and so on. But wait a minute, Muhammad clarifies it. It's at the judgment. The main thing that's going to be pointed out against the Jews is, hey, what were you guys, you Jews, worshiping? And the Jews, are going to say, Ezra.
Yeah.
Now, how is this possible that you've never met a Jew in your life and never heard about one in all of history who worships Ezra? Somehow Muhammad says that at the judgment, this is going to, one, Allah raises this as the main accusation against them. And two, the Jews acknowledge, yeah, that's who we worship. We worship Ezra. Notice, how is this not a problem for Muslims? So if anyone were to misrepresent their beliefs or their religion in any way, it would be a reason never to trust the person ever again. And yet this is a massive misrepresentation of Jewish belief, and zero problem with it. Not only is there zero problem with it, but shame on you if you have a problem with Allah and Muhammad, either completely misrepresenting them out of ignorance or doing so deliberately. Because those are the two options, ladies and gentlemen. If Allah and Muhammad are saying Jews worship Ezra as the divine son of God, and Jews don't do that, then there are two possibilities. Either Allah and Muhammad are completely ignorant, they don't know anything, in which case, why are you taking them as the foundations of your beliefs? Or two, they do know and they're deliberately lying. So ignorant or deceptive. Those are the possibilities, ladies and gentlemen. Yep. Take your pick. And Muslims, if I were you, I'd go with deception, because Allah is the best of deceivers after all.
I mean, this is very clear. The Jews will be called. So there are two groups after all the others have been punished that will be called. Those are the Jews and the Christians. And when the Jews are called, Allah asks them, what did you worship? And they will say, Ezra, the son of Allah. So it is just so completely, undeniably clear that Muhammad, for some reason, used to believe that the Jews had this common belief that Ezra is the son of God and that Ezra is also God. So they used to worship him. This is something that cannot be verified by anybody. I mean, ask any source out there, ask any historian, ask scholars who have studied Judaism with its different understandings and branches and influences and all of that. Nobody can attest to a single group in the world in history that believed Ezra was the son of God and that he was also God. This is entirely ridiculous, completely made up. And part of me thinks, I wonder if some Jews, just to mess with him, came to him and said, "Hey, you know what we believe? We believe Ezra is God and he is the son of God, and we actually worship him," just to test if he would actually adopt this as as a reality. And then he did, and then they kept making fun of him for that. Part of me thinks maybe that's what happened. I don't know, but it's very clear. And if Muslims are seeing this, if Muslims are watching this, if anybody wants to react to this, Farid, if you are going to pick this stream up and react to it, be honest to yourself, be honest to your audience, play this part and respond to it. This is a challenge to any Muslim out there. Play this part and respond to it. Why does the Quran claim that Jews worship Ezra as the son of God? And why does Muhammad in the Hadith explicitly confirm this and apply this to Jews as a group, together with applying something to Christianity and saying they worshipped Jesus as the son of God? Answer this question. It is very obvious here that Muhammad was clueless. Muhammad had no clue what the hell he was talking about. So that's what's up. Yeah, Muhammad was an ignorant dummy. With that, David is probably checking on his kids, checking on something. I don't know if I should go on here without him. He's not adding anything interesting to the conversation anyway. I'm doing all of the work here. He's not adding anything. He's just talking irrelevant stuff. So yeah, I'll just continue with this a little bit.
As you can see, ISIS, with its declaration, is not very far from Islamic teachings in this, if at all. If you look at such publications from ISIS and you feel totally disgusted because they are so twisted, then you should probably ask yourself why you are so tolerant of Islam.
Because most Muslims don't agree with ISIS, and they understand that ISIS is a criminal terrorist organization, and they twist religious texts, and they have this criminal agenda that they are cynical in ascribing it to Islam. So Muslims, vast majority of Muslims reject this. The scholars reject this. The universities reject this.
Do you see the? Do you see how dumb this is? Oh, David, you're back. Let me play this part again.
Not fun. This claim is that let's not lose sight of the fact that that's just really a terrible thing to say.
Yeah, terrible.
As you can see,
Shame on you.
ISIS, with its declaration, is not very far from Islamic teachings in this, if at all. If you look at such publications from ISIS and you feel totally disgusted because they are so twisted, then you should probably ask yourself why you are so tolerant of Islam.
Because most Muslims don't agree with ISIS, and they understand that ISIS is a criminal terrorist organization, and they twist religious texts, and they have this criminal agenda that they are cynical in ascribing it to Islam. So
does he not understand the point of the actual question? Does he not understand context?
Well, I mean, it's also totally. I mean, it's totally. His entire response here is totally weird. It's you have Islam as taught by Muhammad. Then Muhammad dies. A bunch of people rebel. Against Islam, because for lots of people, the only reason they had submitted to Islam is they were scared of Muhammad. Muhammad dies. They think, we don't have to follow Islam anymore, or we can, do Islam kind of how we want to, and so on. Abu Bakr, the first of the rightly guided caliphs, launches wars, the Apostate wars. Either people who were officially renouncing Islam or people who thought that they didn't have to follow Islam in the same way. And there are groups like ISIS look back at that and they think the reason for the early success of Islam was that Abu Bakr purified the Islamic community of apostasy and innovation and things like that. And that's why Allah blessed them to go out and do so much conquering. So they're looking at the world today and saying, wait a minute, according to our Muslim sources, Islam should be dominating the world. Why isn't Islam dominating the world? because we've allowed too much corruption and innovation and apostasy. We haven't enforced Sharia. We've allowed too much influence of Western nations on our community. That's why Allah isn't blessing us. So what do we need to do? We need to crack down and force Sharia to the letter, get back to the original Islam, and then Allah will bless us to go out and conquer the world. That's their entire theory. So their entire theory is, we've gotten away from what real Islam is, and we need to get back to that. That's why the leader of ISIS called himself Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the Abu Bakr he's the new Abu Bakr. It's not his actual name. He wanted to be the new Abu Bakr of Islam, doing what the original Abu Bakr did, and that was the idea. And so he's sitting here saying, but so many Muslims today who've been influenced massively by the West and have adopted a ton of non-Islamic values, they don't like real Islam when they see it. To be clear, I'm not putting the Islamic stamp of approval on everything ISIS did. I can point to things that I would say, even if I were a Muslim, I would not be doing that, because I think there are problems with some of what you've done, even according to Islam sources. But on this issue, I mean, I guess you could, even in terms of the sex slavery thing, like they would basically have Yazidi women in like a house, and these guys just come in and have sex with them and so on. There, I'm not sure you get that from the Muslim sources. But as far as the taking of sex slaves and captives and so on, and even if they're polytheists and even if they're Yazidis, whatever they are, this dude, I mean, ISIS is right about all of that, and this guy's wrong. I mean, think about this. If this guy were sitting down in a room with Muslim scholars from ISIS, or even if he was sitting down with like Daniel Hakikachu or anyone, the Taliban, anything, if he were sitting down with an actual Salafi Islamic scholar, which he should, since there's one right there on the other side of the screen with him, he'd get ripped to shreds. This guy would be, but I read in a book. We don't care, dude. We don't care. We don't care what you read in some weird random book that's designed for Western Muslims to feel better about their religion.
How dare you? How dare you? No, totally right. And after everything that has been said, the whole point of my question was quite clear here. It was, ISIS wrote a pamphlet. You don't agree with ISIS. You are disgusted by them. In the pamphlet, they have laid out things that are quite close to actual Islamic rulings and Islamic morality and Islamic law. So if you are disgusted by what ISIS has put out here, maybe you should ask yourself why you are not disgusted with Islam, considering that the things that are put in here are quite in alignment with what Islam actually says. So I'm not asking why you are disgusted with ISIS. I'm asking why you are disgusted with the things that ISIS says in this pamphlet, because they are quite Islamic. But this guy doesn't get the point. He doesn't understand it. He thinks I'm still asking why people don't like ISIS. Man.
Muslims, vast majority of Muslims reject this. The scholars reject this. The universities reject this. Nobody says this. Nobody says you're allowed to rape slaves. Okay, only ISIS says that, and Ridwan.
I mean, guys. I mean, in Islam, I mean the when the Quran talks about your wives being a tilth, plow them how you want, that was in response to a woman saying she didn't want to have sex in a certain position, and she told her husband, do not come near to me if you want me to do that. Yeah. And Allah's response in the Quran, when this issue was brought to Muhammad, this woman says she's not doing that. She refuses to do this sex act with her husband. Allah's response is, she's your tilth, plow her however you want. I mean, that's your wife. What, your slave girl has all these additional privileges beyond what your wife has? Like your slave girl's treated far better than your wife, really?
And Muhammad said that a wife should, no matter what she's doing, if the husband wants to have sex, she should drop whatever she's doing and she should not refuse. She should make herself available for sex immediately. If she doesn't, she will be cursed until until the breaking of the day by the angels. But yeah, of course, they care more about the slaves than they care about the actual wife.
I've seen talks by Muslim scholars in other countries making fun of the United States because of this. And at first, I was watching one where I thought he was actually condemning a bad practice. He goes, "Did you know that in America you can rape your wife?" And I was thinking, what? You can rape your wife in America? Was this guy going to correct us from an Islamic perspective? And he goes, yeah, how can you rape someone? Right? How can you rape someone that you have a right to have sex with? Right? And so as it went on, he was explaining that rape in Islam is forcing sex upon someone that you have no right to have sex with. That's what it is. Right? And he was confused by the idea that you could have a category of rape that involved your wife, right? In other words, in his view, it didn't matter if a wife says no. You have a right to have sex with her, plow her however you want, and so on. So anyway, it's just interesting that this guy seems to think that we're just making stuff up when we talk about this stuff.
Yeah. So you have just heard in a clip Daniel Kikuchu explain that you can take kids as sex slaves and then use them as use them to have sex with them. But then you hear this guy who says,
reject this. The universities reject this. Nobody says this. Nobody says you're allowed to rape slaves. Okay, only ISIS says that, and Ridwan.
I'd like to.
So this guy then comes and says, oh, you can't even see my screen, right? This guy comes and says, nobody says this, only ISIS says this, and I say this. So I guess Daniel Kikuchu and all of these others who say we can take women and children and use them as sex slaves, what they desire doesn't matter at all. I guess all those people there, they are not Muslims. They don't count. It's just ISIS and me. That's what's happening here.
And Muhammad and his early followers, they weren't Muslims either. These guys are the only real Muslims. These guys, these westernized, watered down, whitewashed version of Islam. That's true Islam. And 14 centuries.
I'm arguing that Sharia.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I'm agreeing with them completely. Islam is this new thing that a couple of westernized Muslims invented and has no connection to the belief of Muhammad and his companions. And
not at all. Muhammad, I had no idea what he was talking about. He was not a real Muslim.
Law is superior to human rights because Sharia rule preserves marriage and family. So Harris, you want to criticize Islam and call Islam barbaric for having slavery, but imagine if I asked you this question. Do you support using weapons in war? Do you support using guns to shoot people or swords to stab people and kill people? Do you support that? Because all of that is violent. All of that is barbaric. Presumably, you'd say, yeah, of course I support weapons and killing, because how else are you going to fight war and defend yourself? Well, that's exactly...
Do you support slapping people? That is also violence. So why are you against sex slavery?
The point with slavery. In the pre-modern period, you couldn't have war without slavery any more than you could have war without weapons and killing. In other words, if killing people can sometimes be justified, then slavery can also sometimes be justified. You should just acknowledge that slavery could be completely justified in certain circumstances, which, by the way, are the circumstances people have lived in for 99% of human history. Now, if you want to argue that Islam requires enslaving people today, I would say that that is not correct. It depends on the imam. The imam has the option to pardon people and forego taking slaves in war.
This is a very funny part. Since I'm playing this clip, I want to quickly draw attention to some of the deception that even Daniel Kikuchu does, who is normally very honest about Islam. He is arguing basically that even now, slavery and sex slavery is okay, but he is responding to something that nobody has ever raised, even in this debate, and saying Muslims are not required to take them as slaves because the leader can also choose to just let them go. But he doesn't deny that slavery is totally fine and can be done today as well.
In modern times, a hypothetical imam could exercise this option and still be 100%.
A hypothetical imam.
Yeah, this option.
Understanding of traditional Islamic law. You could respond to me and say, well, Daniel, fine, slavery could be justified in the past, but now with modern technology, modern weapons, clearly slavery could never be justified. That means Islamic rules regarding slavery are not justifiable in our modern context, which means at least one aspect of Islamic law is obsolete. And if one aspect of Islamic law is obsolete due to modern technology, then why not all of Islamic law? But the response to this is simple. Which is the better world? One with the constant threat of nukes and constant terrorizing of the world's poor people with trillion-dollar weapons programs? In light of these modern technological horrors, the practice of Islamic slavery actually seems a far better alternative in the context of war, even if it were practiced today. Now, let me get to the point about sex slavery. Yes, taking sex slaves was not only morally just.
So,
yeah, and I just want everyone should understand what he's saying in his little imaginary back and forth there. So part of his point is, guys, yes, it may make sense to you today to say, hey, you know, if you're fighting a battle and so on, you win, you conquer your enemy and so on, you don't enslave them. And his claim is, well, if you go back earlier in history, okay, you go out and you fight a war, you beat the other guys. What do? You just say, oh, okay, we just defeated you. Now you can all go free. Well, you're gonna be fighting these guys again real quick, like so. As a means of protecting your community, you actually enslave part of the population of the other group, and so you could use that as an explanation for why, hey, even though you're not a fan of this, let's say, in earlier periods of human history, there weren't a lot of good options after a battle. And so he's saying, but now it's different. If you're fighting a country or something, it's a modern world, you're not exactly in that same situation that you would have been. And so he's saying it would be optional now, because you don't have to. You don't need to take everyone as slaves in order to make sure that you don't have to deal with these people over again. Or if you're talking about female slaves, it was a reality of battle that you could fight with people, and all the men get killed in battle, and then there's these women left in a desert. What's better? Is it marrying the women, or is it taking the women as captives, or is it leaving these women out there and maybe they die? Don't know. Whereas today, that would not be a situation, because it's not like that. You're fighting, and then the male population gets annihilated, and all that's left is women. And what's going to happen to these women? So I think that's where he's going with all this, and that's why he's saying it's optional now. An imam wouldn't have to say, let's enslave all these people. You could just say,
but he's also saying, should we, even in today's time, it would still be justified and would still be okay, because do you want to have a threat in the world of mass destruction, or would you just take your opponents as slaves and settle the case?
Yeah, so it looks like he's saying, yeah, we don't have to do it today because you don't have the same, but it's still optional,
and it's still good. Look at this.
Yeah.
I mean,
technology, then why not all of Islamic law? But the response to this is simple. Which is the better world? One with the constant threat of nukes and constant terrorizing of the world's poor people with trillion-dollar weapons programs? In light of these modern technological horrors, the practice of Islamic slavery actually seems a far better alternative in the context of war, even if it were practiced today. Now, let me get...
No, look at what he just said. He's saying the Islamic practice. So notice, guys, you can say, hey, there are situations like war where you end up with a bunch of bad options, and so any option you pick is going to be a bad option. And so which option is best? Which bad option is best considering the available alternatives? It looks like what he's saying is the Islamic way of conquering a people, taking the women as sex slaves, enslaving the males and making them your slaves, that's actually better than having nuclear weapons and having powerful nations able to tell other nations, hey, shut up or we'll nuke you, which it isn't even really much of a thing now. You don't see a lot of, we'll nuke you. Everyone knows people usually aren't going to, unless you get some nut job, no one's going to use nukes anymore. But I think it looks like the point he's making is you still have powerful nations like the United States imposing their will on Muslim nations. And if you don't do what the powerful Western nations say, then they can make you do it. And he's saying the Islamic way is actually better. It's actually better to go back to the old system than the new system.
The olden days.
to the point about sex
Out
slaves.
with the new, back to the old. The message of Daniel Hakikachu.
Taking sex slaves was not only morally justified, it was morally necessary. And really, that's enough for the argument, but it's worth noting that the Sharia's rules
He just said necessary.
Yeah, yeah.
are the most humane out of any other civilization. Islam explicitly gives slaves many rights. They can't be mutilated, they can't be killed, they can't be prostituted. For women, if she gives birth to her master's baby, the baby is free, and she also is freed automatically when her master dies. And I think the audience sees that. I have a very simple argument. Sharia preserves marriage and family and community and the human race overall. And I'm bringing statistics, objective statistics.
So yeah,
That's why That's why things are so wonderful in the Muslim world, and why everyone wants to move to the Muslim world and not leave the Muslim world and come to a Western nation.
I mean, I can't wait till we start the whole Islamic wars, the jihad again, and things return to being wonderful, like taking sex slaves and all that, instead of the constant threat of nukes that everyone is so anxious about nowadays. He makes a good point.
Notice what he's really saying, right? Like the reason we don't constantly have wars right now is everyone's scared of more powerful places that could make them stop, and so on. And so on. He's saying it would be better to just be in this, state of constant, endless warfare and taking captives and so on.
Alhamdulillah.
I'd like to add on to that. We're briefly speaking about this earlier. The very fact that Muslims, when entering, for example, Khaybar and entering Mecca, they didn't run around, take all the women captive, and rape all the women. Rather, they asked the Prophet ﷺ for a solution. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, allowed them temporary marriage. And of course, when you have temporary marriage, that's an example of intercourse through consent. I mean, it is a marriage at the end of the day. So yeah, it just goes to show that there is...
Notice, hiring a prostitute is consensual. You see? I mean, you're not going out and raping, you're paying the prostitute and then signing the marriage contract. So you're assuming that you can notice here. One, it's so dumb. They start talking about all these other things that aren't what we're talking about. That you can have sex with those whom your right hands possess. What in the world does that mean? They talk about all these other things. So what he's talking about with mutta is you're actually taking a prostitute and putting her in the wife category for an hour or a day or 3 days or whatever. And you see, it's consent. Yes, if you're marrying a prostitute for 3 hours so you can have sex with her, that is consensual. That's why you're paying her.
This is so stupid. Whenever I watch a Farid respond video, I just think I have to really refrain myself from asking questions about the intellect of people who watch his channel and then agree with him and applaud him, because I mean, he listened to this. I don't want to misrepresent him directly. Listen to what he's just said.
For example, I'd like to add on to that. We're briefly speaking about this earlier. The very fact that Muslims, when entering, for example, Khaybar and entering Mecca, they didn't run around, take all the women captive, and rape all the women. Rather, they asked the Prophet ﷺ for a solution, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, allowed them temporary marriage. And of course, when you have temporary marriage, that's an example of intercourse through consent.
So what happens here is what happened during the battle is that the Muslims were there, and they said, "Oh, Rasulullah, we have been apart from our wives for a long time, and we are very horny right now. What are we supposed to do with all of these women that are standing over there?" He said, "You know what? You can make contracts with those women, have sex with them temporarily. That means you are married to them, and then once you're done, you will dissolve the marriage again. This is for now." And later, allegedly, he abolished that. But what is happening here is, I am saying, in Islam, there is sex slavery. Islam permits Muslims to take the families, the women of their opponents, as slaves, to then turn them into sex slaves and to have sex with them. And this is terrible. This is unacceptable. This should not be a thing. And what he does is, I mean, of course, they did not just go around and rape all the women. No, I mean, they also had temporary marriage, which of course shows that they cared a lot about consent. So,
well, but by the way, this is stupid. the situations where mutta would be significant is you're traveling, right? You're traveling. You end up in some city. You haven't subjugated that city. You're moving on to fight a war against someone else, but you're horny, and so there are some local women there, and you say, "Hey, send us the prostitutes. We want to marry them for a little while, so we can have sex with them." That's a different thing from the women you capture and make your sex slaves. So yes, you can capture women, and you can fight a battle and capture women, but if you're just traveling, you end up in a city on your way to somewhere else to fight. They did take sex slaves as after the Battle of Kaibar. They did do that. That's separate from a situation where you're in a city and, hey, what are we going to do? Abdul over there, he's really horny. He's been away from his wife for like 8 days now. What are we going to do? Oh, no problem. Temporary marriage. He can go hire a prostitute for a couple hours. So anyways, I don't know. It's like what Farid knows they took sex slaves. He knows that. And then he's trying to deflect by saying, but they had mutta too. Okay, so they got a couple of messed up practices. Great. Thank you, Farid, for
fantastic
drawing our attention to other horrible Islamic practices.
I mean, just look at this hadith here. Look at this hadith. So Farid says this is not a problem because obviously the Muslims cared so much about consent that they allowed temporary marriage when they went to this specific place. And this is actually talking about the very same. Didn't he just mention Khaybar? Wasn't that the issue?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this hadith says, Anas said, captives were gathered at Khaybar. Dihya came out and said, Apostle of Allah, give me a slave girl from the captives. He said, go and take a slave girl. He took Safiya, daughter of Huyay. A man then came to the Prophet and said, you gave Safiya, daughter of Huyay, a chief lady of Quraiza and Al-Nadir to Dihya. This is according to the version of Yaqub. The Prophet then called her back and said, take another slave girl from the captives. And the Prophet then set her free and married her. So in this instance, Muhammad, upon those horny guys asking, please give me one of those slave girls, Muhammad says, yeah, just go and get one. Just go and take one of those women. But Farid is like, you see, it's not a problem because the Prophet said when they were very horny, just go and make a temporary marriage with those women and have sex with them, and then you can dissolve it again, no problem. Therefore, all your objections about sex slavery, of the captives of war, they don't matter. Farid, I know you will be watching this, and I want to say this in front of everyone who is watching. Things like these are why I sit here, and many people like myself, we sit here and we watch your responses and we think, how dumb can you possibly be that you respond with such a thing which changes or challenges nothing about what I said at all, and then you seriously think that you have actually given a great response and you have shut down all the Islamophobes and you have ended their arguments and you have defended Islam successfully, and this is amazing. A lot of people like us who are not as dumb as you sit here and think, what are you talking about? What is wrong with you, man? How do you think this makes sense? This is the pain that we are all feeling. And maybe it's not your fault. I don't know. It's probably not your fault, but this is what we are all forced to endure when you make response videos. Please sit down, reflect. I don't know.
This is to connect this to some of our recent discussions of Sneeko and Andrew Tate. Go ahead and click that hadith I just sent you.
Oh boy,
it's actually connected. It's all related. So you had the hummus. That's the war booty, and Muhammad is supposed to divide this up, and he gets his fifth, and so on. Well, Ali, on one occasion, went ahead and snatched up a sex slave before the spoils could be divided. He just couldn't wait, and he went and had sex with a girl. I mean, keep in mind, this is this is Muhammad's son. I mean, What is it? Son-in-law or stepson? I always get those confused. Which one is it?
It's his son-in-law. Yeah.
Okay, son-in-law. Narrated Beretta, the prophet
It's his,
sent
it's
Ali.
his relative. Actually, it's his. I think he was his cousin, but also his son-in-law. He married his daughter. Yeah.
So the prophet sent Ali to Khalid to bring the khummas of the booty. And I hated Ali. And Ali had taken a bath after a sexual act with a slave girl from the khummas. So he takes it early, before it's brought back to Muhammad for Muhammad to decide, how to divide it up. I said to Khalid, "Don't you see this? When we reached the prophet, I mentioned that to him. He said, 'Oh, Beretta, do you hate Ali?' I said, 'Yes.' He said, 'Do you hate him? For he deserves more than that from the khummas.'" Notice, right? There's a passage where a slave took like a jacket from the khummas without permission, and Muhammad said he was going to hell for it. He said he's going to hell. He said he's going to hell for it.
Yeah.
This guy was going to burn in hell for eternity for taking a jacket out of the khummas. Ali takes a slave girl, goes ahead and bones her, and then this is being brought back to Muhammad, and a Muslim objects to this. "Hey, what's up with this?" And Muhammad says, "Come on, he deserves more than that." So this is Muhammad giving this dude a free pass. Keep in mind, he's not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to touch this stuff until it's divided up properly. Ali goes ahead and takes it. Muhammad gives him a free pass. And so we see the principle very early on in Islam. If you're a special guy, you get special moral privileges. This is true, obviously, of Muhammad. Yeah, everyone else gets 4 wives, but he gets 9 or 11 or however many he wants. And but you also see it with important figures like Ali here. Ali completely breaks the rule, takes a slave girl before the property's been divided up. Muhammad has no problem with it. Free pass for Ali because he's important. And by the way, this is like the mentality that we see with Andrew Tate and Sneeko. These guys can do whatever they want. They can be doing any perverted stuff they want, sex trafficking, any of that stuff. Free pass because they're important.
Yeah. This is the hadith that David was just referencing, in which it says, "We were with the messenger of Allah in the year of Khaybar, and we did not get any spoils of war except for wealth, goods, and clothes. Then a man from Banu Dubayb, who was called Rifa bin Zayd, gave the messenger of Allah a black slave who was called Midam."
Wait, no. This dude says Islam abolished slavery.
The messenger of Allah set out for Wadi al-Qura. When we were in the Wadi of al-Qura, while Midam was unloading the luggage of the messenger of Allah, an arrow came and killed him. The people said, "Congratulations, you will go to paradise," to the black slave. But the messenger of Allah said, "No, by the one in whose hand is my soul, the cloak that he took from the spoils of war on the day of Khaybar is burning him with fire." When the people heard that, a man brought 1 or 2 shoelaces to the messenger of Allah, and the messenger of Allah said 1 or 2 shoelaces of fire. So he basically said that slave, for taking a cloak from among the spoils of war, is burning with fire. But Ali, of course, he can just go and take one of those slaves, just have sex with her and whatever.
Because he's important, like Andrew Tate.
Yep. That's it. That's how Islam works, man.
I mean, it is a marriage at the end of the day. So yeah, it just goes to show that there is a lot more to the topic. And
this is such a funny objection. Oh, look at how this guy is talking about sex slavery when he doesn't even know that we had prostitution when there was a war going on. And prostitution is with consent. So what are you talking about?
Prostitution is with consent. Therefore, how can these Islamophobes object to sex slavery?
Yeah. You just sounded like an alien again, but I think people got your point.
Did I?
Yeah.
that Radwan seems to be aware of.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's a good point. But we also need to say that
is a good point.
There's hadith that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam eventually forbade temporary marriage.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
Did he though?
He had to jump in and quickly fix that problem that door that Farid just opened. It's funny.
Hey, I just sent you a hadith. Check it out real quick.
Okay. Oh boy. We used to participate in the holy battles. Can you read this with Farid's?
narrated Abdullah, we used to participate in the holy battles led by Allah's messenger, and we had nothing, no wives with us. So we said, shall we get ourselves castrated? Then Muhammad said, guys, have some self-control for once in your life. Oh, sorry, that's not what he said at all. He forbade us that, castration, and then allowed us to marry women with a temporary contract and recited to us, O you who believe, make not unlawful the good things which Allah has made lawful for you, but commit no transgression. That's a quotation from the Quran. Surah 5, verse 87. Muhammad quoted the Quran to justify muta marriage. And then
Prostitution.
And then let me go and read let me read two passages from Sahih Muslim here. So Sahih Muslim 32:48. Ibn Urayj reported, Ati reported that Jabir ibn Abdullah came to perform Umrah, and we came to his abode, and the people asked him about different things, and then they made a mention of temporary marriage, whereupon he said, yes, we had been benefiting ourselves by this temporary marriage during the lifetime of the Holy Prophet and during the time of Abu Bakr and Umar, referring to their leadership. Abu Bakr and Umar. They were still doing it during the time of Abu Bakr and Umar. Sahih Muslim 32:50. Abu Najr reported, while I was in the...
Wait. Let me put this on the screen, actually.
You got it?
I don't. I'm looking it up now. Because you should send me the link, man.
Oh, you want it? I will have to look this up because this is a different numbering system than sunnah.com. But if you talk about something for a good 30 seconds or so, I can find it for you.
So I wanted to talk about temporary marriage, which is basically prostitution, and I think it's basically it's something that Muhammad, of course, allowed for the benefit of the ummah, and it was amazing, and why not? So yeah.
I have it. Now I have to. This is why I didn't want to do it, because then I have to transfer it over. Let's see. Where is my
temporary marriage? Oh, yeah, I have one here. Ibn Raji said, Ati report. Is it Ati or is it Ati? Whatever, reported that Jibr ibn Abdullah came to perform Umrah, and we came to his abode, and the people asked him about different things. And then they made mention of temporary marriage, whereupon he said, yes, we had been benefiting ourselves by this temporary marriage during the lifetime of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and during the time of Abu Bakr and Umar.
Go to the next hadith. Again, this has a different numbering system. Go to the next one. No, if you go down, there's a way to go to the next hadith.
Really, I never figured that out. That's fine.
Yeah, right there. See, again, different numbering system. Scroll down. Let's see what they went to. Now go to the next one. See if that's 3250. Yeah. See what this one says. Abu Najr reported, while I was in the company of Jabir ibn Abdullah, a person came to him and said that Ibn Abbas and Ibn Zubair differed on the two types of mutta, whereupon Jabir said, we used to do these two during the lifetime of Allah's messenger. Umar then forbade us to do them, and so we did not revert to them. Notice, so the claims you have here is that they were still doing it during the time of Muhammad and during the time of Abu Bakr and during the time of Umar. And then Umar forbade the practice, and then later Muslims who didn't do this anymore, then the story would go, eventually made up hadiths about Muhammad forbidding it in order to justify condemning it. But notice, Muhammad actually quoted the Quran to justify it. So Muhammad allows it. Muhammad quotes the Quran to justify it, and then you end up with a dispute later on. And this is going to be one of the issues that Joshua Little says that different areas of the Muslim world differed on. Some allowed mutta, some didn't allow mutta. And then they write hadiths that go back to Muhammad to try and justify it one way or another. But they're both making stuff up. And so you end up with some people who say, yes, Muhammad forbade it. And you have other people saying, no, Muhammad didn't do it. That was a later Muslim leader who forbade the practice. Point was, Fareed, this isn't a settled matter. This is not a settled matter. And what you would say here is it's kind of a, do you want to do muta? If so, you go with hadiths like this and you say the other people just made those up. And if you don't like muta, you think that's, hiring prostitutes is a horrible practice. You say, yes, the hadiths about Muhammad forbidding the practice, those are the authentic ones. And these other guys who say it was allowed later, they don't know what they're talking about.
So I have to disagree with you here, David.
Then you're going to get crushed.
We can have different opinions here on this matter. I could say, it seems to me likely that if I apply the standards of hadith studies, which I have so far learned, it could be that the narrations about Muhammad actually prohibiting it over time could be considered more credible, considering that that they are more numerous in number and that there are more narratives which say that Muhammad actually forbid it. So here's, for example, one of those reports which say Ali ibn Abi Talib reported that Allah's messenger prohibited on the day of Khaybar the contracting of temporary marriage with women and the eating of the flesh of domestic asses. So he forbid marriage with women and forbid eating asses. So
I knew it. I knew you were going to go there. I knew it when I saw it. And I was like, oh man, I don't want to say anything, but I knew you're going to do it. I knew you couldn't resist. It's wrong.
So I could say, since there are also different reports which report a similar thing, that Muhammad might have indeed forbidden it. Some of them say that he allowed it for 3 nights, I think, and then he forbid it. However, here is the issue. I could grant that I could consider it more credible, the theory that Muhammad actually forbid it, because that has the more reliable number of narrations. But what does it show you? Muhammad on that day allows them to do temporary marriages, to actually, to hire those women and say, hey, how about you get married to me for a while and we have sex together, and then once we're done, you are free to go. You can do whatever you want with your life. I don't care. And he cited a Quran verse while giving that permission and said, do not prohibit, these wonderful things that are allowed to you. But then later, the same Muhammad who allowed this, who made a moral decision, a ruling, and who allowed this, and who even cited the Quran in order to support, this practice, then was like, okay, guys, as of now, it's banned. From now on, we don't do this anymore. It's banned now. What exactly does it tell you about Muhammad? How does he rule? What are his rulings based on? It looks like he just makes up rules as he goes, as he lives.
Yeah,
he cites the Quran to allow something, but then goes against that very citation of the Quran to prohibit it again.
Yeah, so I think the point we would agree upon here is it's messed up regardless, right? So, and notice the Islamic justification for why Muhammad allowed muta at all would be, but his followers were far away from home and really horny, and therefore he allowed it for the time. Okay, well, guess what? That is exactly the sort of situation that's always going to arise in war. So why is it allowed at that time and then forbidden later? If you're forbidding it later, saying I don't care how horny you are, don't hire prostitutes, then why not do it? Why not have the rule there? Why did he allow it at all? But as far as just saying but there are more hadiths saying this than that, that doesn't quite work, because you have multiple hadiths on both issues. Yes, you do have more hadiths saying that it was forbidden, but the pro muta crowd in the hadiths have a completely reasonable explanation for why you had those hadiths, and the explanation was a later Muslim eventually forbade the practice, and therefore the Muslim community who were following him stopped doing it. But eventually it came to the issue, why are we forbidding this practice? And therefore they start making up hadiths about how this actually goes back to Muhammad forbidding the practice, and so on. And so maybe from an Islamic perspective, you could say, these guys, we respect these hadiths that say Muhammad forbade it and so on. From a historical perspective, I mean, this is exactly the sort of thing Joshua Little's talking about, where different areas were practicing different things. And then when someone tries to force one version of Islam, they just kind of go with those hadiths that are supporting their views, because you had this on lots of other issues, and you see it in the hadiths. AP, you've seen the hadiths where various companions of Muhammad are condemned for thinking that plow your wives however you want refers to anal sex.
Oh,
But
yeah.
that was a regional thing. In other words, there are Muslims in one region who say that's totally fine, and there are Muslims in a different region. And then eventually they get to a point where they say, no, all Muslims have to be on the same page here. Okay, we'll go with this, and we'll condemn all the people who supported it. It's like, wait, those are companions of Muhammad saying that. I mean, I think that was Ibn Masud saying. It was Ibn Masud. Muhammad said, if you want to learn the Quran from anyone, learn it from him. And he said that's what it means. And so anyway, point is, it's a pretty big mess, man. It's a big mess.
It is pretty messed up. Marisa Kennedy said, let's make a TV series about Muhammad's life. If you thought Game of Thrones was risque, it would be all the rage in Islamic countries.
Yeah, can you imagine? I don't even think you could film this.
You would have to find adult actors that look like children.
Yeah, what are you going to show? You're going to show Muhammad and a 9-year-old? You're going to show Muhammad sucking on a little boy's tongue? You can't show that stuff.
Yeah. You have to. I guess you could describe it, like the characters could describe it after it happens, but then not actually show it or something like that.
Yeah, the only way to do it is claymation or Lego stop motion.
Yeah. Or they sometimes make these shows or movies where they the plot is about high school, but then you just see a bunch of 20 and 30-year-olds playing high schoolers. In the same sense, you could have adults that look like 6-year-olds or 9-year-olds, and
or yeah, just have a 20-year-old playing a 6-year-old, and then
that's so messed up, man.
If you are still tolerant of Islam, thanks for watching. If you like this video,
thank you, Ridwan. I think we're done.
Yeah, thank you, Ridwan, for giving us this opportunity to completely show that you're right.
Yeah,
that's stuff. So it's 30 pages. I have lots of hadith, I have an article coming out for Yakin.
Oh, he has an article coming out. Oh, look at that.
Yakin. Oh, yeah, Yakin. These are the same guys who say that Aisha was older than 9 and so on.
I'm here.
Possibly. That's what they say. Possibly.
See you guys.
Yeah, but so nothing of importance was brought to us as a result of this Farid response video.
Farid, I remember they said Aisha had reached puberty, and then they quote an actual mistranslation of a hadith. That's funny.
Yeah. I think they had a huge paper, didn't they, where they talk about different aspects and the historical context and this and that, and it's just a huge, long, lengthy paper about nothing, just presenting the same old arguments, justifying the marriage, and that's it. It's just so ridiculous.
No, and it's something I can't even take seriously. As soon as you quote a hadith, which is mistranslated. So in the actual Arabic, Aisha says, "From the time I could remember things," which when's the time I can remember stuff from when I was 3 and 4. Lots of people say 5, or definitely by 5 or 6 and so on. But they translate that as from the time I reached puberty. It's like, wait, what? Are you joking?
Reached puberty. Yeah, whatever. We can talk about that some other time. Radar Apologetics said, God bless you, AP and David Wood. Thank you for your work for our Messiah.
Yeah, thank you for your work, AP, for the Messiah.
Not me. I mean, it's talking to you.
He says, thank you, AP and David Wood.
Probably typed that wrong. I don't know. Jesse Brand said, just saw your debate with Hussein and you demolished him so hard he started crying about bombings. LOL, making me scared you'll debunk my Bible. See?
I still haven't seen any of the debates with Hussein.
You should see them. They were fantastic. Noel L. Wood said, so is Hamas against ISIS? They were politically, yes, because ISIS declared them false and taking politics as idols and stuff like that. But yeah.
I mean, keep in mind the reasoning. If you're saying we've reestablished the caliphate and you refuse to submit to the caliphate, then you're on the wrong end of things according to the caliphate.
Yeah. ISIS made it very clear that it is an obligation upon every single Muslim in the world to pledge allegiance to the Islamic State, and all those who refuse are the enemies of Islam here. So Balashik said, but David, doesn't this happen in the Old Testament also?
I think he's talking about the captives and so on. No, in the Old Testament, if you wanted to have sex with a captive, you had to give her 30 days to mourn for their family that she lost in the battle, and you had to marry her. And if things didn't work out with the marriage, then she was to go free as a free woman.
In the
That's
Old
what that
Testament.
that's what you read in Deuteronomy, and besides that, those still aren't even the final marching order. When we're talking about Islam, guys, we're talking about it for a reason. This is still the ideal in Islam. This is what it's supposed to be like. In other words, Islam isn't saying, "Hey, this is what the situation was in a really, really ancient world." These are the final marching orders of your Creator.
But doesn't the Old Testament tell you that every single person who believes in it shall emulate the perfect example of people who lived thousands of years ago, and that they are perfect moral examples, and you cannot question them, and you have to obey them whatever they do?
Yeah, that's why if you make up a story about Isaac marrying a 3-year-old, then that would be binding on all people, and we would have to conclude that it's wrong to condemn anyone for having sex with a little prepubescent little girl.
Yeah,
because that's how it works.
Stephen Young said, "Do Muslims have to behave themselves in a country where they are a minority, then become more aggressive when they are a majority? If so, what source?" This is Islamophobic stuff.
Yeah, I mean, what you usually from the Muslim sources, they don't seem to have much of a concept. Once Islam is fully grown, they don't seem to have much of a concept of Muslims wanting to go and live with the non-Muslims. They don't seem to have much of a concept of that. It's going to be, here's the Muslim world, here's everyone else, and that's the house of war. But you did end up with this as a reality, namely that Islam does a pretty terrible job at making countries where people actually want to live. So they want to get as far away from there as possible. They want to come to the United States and so on. But yeah, I have heard, Anjum Chowdhury and so on they've been saying for a long time, hey, if we have some sort of covenant with the country that we're living in, that we have to operate within the bounds of the law in this country. With that said, the pattern of conduct in Islam is Muhammad, and when you look at what Muhammad did, when he was the minority, it was, hey, live in peace and tolerance with everyone. God's going to judge eventually. When he became more numerous, then it was, you can wage defensive jihad. When he had the most powerful force in Arabia, it's everyone has to be subjugated. And so the pattern there is not you move to Medina and then you always honor everyone else and everyone's fine. But by the way, by the end it was, I will expel the Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula and will not leave any but Muslims. That's Sahih Muslim. So I mean, you have Jews and Christians in the Arabian Peninsula. And at first it's, hey, make alliances and so on when convenient. But the final takeaway is the ultimate goal is to take over and force everyone out or subjugate everyone.
Yeah, I can make it very simple. Even Mohammed Hijab, in his discussion with me, explained something very simple, which is that living in the UK, he has an obligation to abide by the laws of the UK. Right, but he is also, as a Muslim, supposed to spread his religion and make sure that people convert to Islam, right? But he does not explicitly, at this moment, want to turn the UK into an Islamic state. He cannot say this. But he also explained to me that if the majority of the population is Muslim and the majority of the population decides to implement Islam, then it should be expected to accept that. And if the majority does implement Islam, then it should be implemented in a rightful and truthful way. So what you can conclude from all of this is, even according to our friendly Muslim apologists here, yes, they should normally, technically abide by the laws, but also spread Islam. And once Islam is spread enough, they should impose Islam. So, yeah, there you go. Sam said, Ridwan, Christianity allows for the same atrocities as Islam. Will you confront David about these issues, or do you not mind if they are you friend? I like your work, but I need to see some consistency. Thank you very much.
Do you believe that, AP, that Christianity allows me to go out and take sex slaves and sex captives and rape them?
So I think that Christianity forbids polygamy, prohibits sex slavery. I don't think it allows or it explicitly endorses slavery. I would say that I would personally, from my understanding of Christianity and Christian sources, I don't see any explicit prohibition of slavery, which is why early Christians did do such a practice. But the issue is here, what exactly does allow mean? Because from allow, I could also deduce that an atheist is also allowed to do slavery. A Buddhist is also allowed to take slaves. That's not the same as saying that they are explicitly told or endorsed to take slaves or to instate slavery. Those are entirely two different things. In Islam, you have the system of slavery imposed, endorsed. You are told to go out and fight and to take slaves. I don't see such a thing in Christianity. You are told to go out and take sex slaves, to kill apostates, to kill blasphemers, to do all of these things. I don't see those things in Christianity. So, no, I would not say that Christianity has the very same thing. So
Yeah, and in Christianity, you have rules like love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you. You have commands about praying for all people, honoring all people. I mean, that's a command: honor all people, and so on. And so you have commands: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so, hey, should I go around and raping female captives? Well, would I want to be raped as a female captive if I were, in this situation? The answer is no. Point is, where do you see that? Where do you see Jesus's followers, any of these guys, doing this stuff? So, yeah, I don't.
This is like saying. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Oh, I was going to point out. I was going to. Okay, so the only commands that we actually have about how we would interact with people are commands about loving them and so on. And so I don't know where you be getting the idea that it's okay to go, like you'd be saying what it's okay to go out and rape and torture and enslave people that you love and honor. That would be weird. But yeah, it's if you're treating that as the same as, hey, the pattern of conduct that you have in Islam did these things and specifically allowed these things, and therefore AP Christianity has the same thing. Why don't you object? I actually like to respond. Well, following that, well, I mean, there's nothing in atheism that would say you're not allowed to do these.
I was thinking immediately of a tweet that Daniel Kikuchu, the genius, made the other day, which was in response to somebody saying that Islam allows for men to have 4 wives and unlimited sex slaves and treat the women like this and that. Islam is obviously misogynistic and so on. Daniel Kikuchu responded to that by saying, liberalism allows you to have as many girlfriends and wives as possible, and to also take to take animals and have sex with them and this and that. So his logic is those things are not prohibited in your worldview. So what do you want from us? But that's not how it works. First off, he's entirely wrong, because liberalism is an idea that is based on certain people who outlined liberalism, according to which the whole concept of bestiality eventually came to be understood as wrong, because it contradicts with fundamentals of liberalism. But that's not how it works, because what we are saying here is Islam explicitly endorses these things. It doesn't just allow them. So it doesn't just abstain from forbidding them. It explicitly mentions these things as things that are allowed. So explicitly allowing something and not forbidding something are not the same thing. In a liberal mindset now, you can do your thinking, you can philosophize, you can do your research, and you can conclude that it is probably not in the best interest of all involved parties and in humanity's interest to go and wage war and have numerous sex slaves and wives and have sex with animals and this and that. You can rationally come to the conclusion that that is probably not ideal. In Islam, you can't sit down and come to the conclusion that that polygamy is actually wrong, that sex slavery is actually wrong. You cannot come to these conclusions, because even if you rationally, pursued the whole idea of what's best in everyone's interest, you can simply not contradict with what Islam explicitly permits and even endorses. That there is the difference. That's the problem.
Yeah, so that would pretty much sum it up. For some reason, I was just thinking about this this passage in Clement of Rome. So Clement of Rome was still very early Christian. This was from the very next generation. And he wrote in 1 Clement chapter 55, we know that many among ourselves have delivered themselves into bondage, that they might ransom others. Many have sold themselves into slavery, and receiving the price paid for themselves, have fed others. Now look at what he's saying here. We know that many among ourselves, he's presenting this as a problem, telling people to stop doing this. We know that many among ourselves, so many Christians, have delivered themselves into bondage. So they're selling themselves as slaves, that they might ransom others. And then he says, many have sold themselves into slavery, and receiving the price paid for themselves, have fed others. Look at what they're doing. They're saying, hey, that guy's a slave over there. I'm going to sell myself into slavery in order to free that guy. Or I'm going to sell myself into slavery in order to free the poor. This was kind of the takeaway for people who are, oh, Jesus laid down his life for others, therefore I'm going to go and lay down my life for others. But Christians actually get into the habit of selling themselves into slavery in order to liberate others or to help others. And so anyway, the point there is, guys, it seems to kind of matter who you're taking as your moral example. So the takeaway for the early Christians, and they had to be corrected on this, was, hey, I care about others so much now that I'm going to sell myself into slavery to feed them or to liberate other people from slavery, versus the pattern you get from Muhammad, whose followers had a pretty different takeaway message there.
Yeah. So, I mean, very, very quick response to this whole question is, I don't agree with you that Christianity allows for the same atrocities. I simply don't. As from how I studied Christianity and how I studied other religions, I don't think any religion that I know of that exists today and it plays a major role in the world allows for the same atrocities as Islam. I would argue that that Judaism, Talmudic Judaism, has certain aspects that are more problematic than Christianity, but even then, it doesn't allow for or explicitly endorse practices that are as bad as what Islam presents. If you think I'm wrong, please prove me wrong by arguing with me. I have argued this issue with people before. There are things that I can disagree with in terms of Christianity and Christian morals, Christian thinking, but none of those things are so bad that I would have to come out here and say, oh, I have to fight this and I have to call you out and I have to fix this problem. No, Islam is the only religion that I have such a big problem with. Yeah. With that said, but I appreciate your input. Keep it up. Mercedes F1 fan said, don't you get bored hating on Muslims and Islam? No. Mercedes F1 fan said, imagine being a grown man hating on Islam. Get a life.
It's the same dude sending you money.
I guess so. I don't know, but thank you for the.
But I mean, keep in mind, this religion says AP has to die because he's an apostate. This religion says AP and David both have to die because they criticize Islam, and then it's when we respond in any way, hey, we don't want you following that command to kill us. Ha ha, lol, get a life.
Stop crying. Stop crying, man.
It's funny stuff.
Stop crying. Apostles and laws, apostles. Who cares? Stop lying. Stop crying. And no, I don't want to grow up. So, yeah. Have you all seen the recent news article discussing a prominent cleric's claim that over 60% of mosques in Iran have closed? Please cover that in a video. I haven't seen that.
No, I mean, I saw a study a few years ago that said over half of people in Iran are non-Muslims now. But
yeah, they reject.
Yeah, but the caveat there is this was an online survey, so it's not taking into account everyone who's offline. But as far as the people responding online to the poll, the statistics were over half of people in Iran now no longer consider themselves Muslim. Yeah. But again, that doesn't tell you about all the people who aren't responding online.
All right. Mercedes F1 fan made another super chat. Thank you so much for your contributions. And said nobody takes David the Psycho seriously, right?
Correct.
The real masquerade said, how is it rape if the owner consents?
Hey, wait. Go back to that other one.
What? To the other one? This one?
Yeah, I forgot our rule. We dial things down until someone starts insulting. So nobody takes Muhammad the pedophile seriously, right? Mercedes F1 fan. Nobody takes Muhammad the pedophile, right? Keep in mind, I wasn't going to say it, but now you started. They
I
started.
don't want to insult the guy. He already pays money for these messages. So yeah, thanks.
That money shall
Keep
be
going.
that money shall be put to a good use, exposing Muhammad as an obvious false prophet.
Continue making more super chats and saying terrible things about me and
Tell
David.
us more. Tell us
Yeah.
more.
Alan said, "Shalom. Thank you. Please stop exposing us as the secret people that we are." Marisa, I already responded to this. That's all. Okay. Thanks everyone for watching. Goodbye. Anything else you want to say, David?
No. Oh, yeah. Tomorrow, I think we'll be talking about Fareed a bit more tomorrow because he made a video responding to, I guess, responding to some clips I shared of Shabir Ali and Yasser Qadi admitting that there are different Qurans in different parts of the world, and I think he called Shabir a punk or something like this, and then called Yasser Qadi a liar. But what I actually wanted to get to, because it was a long video, we'll only check out some clips. I went to the comments section, and his fans are all going, "Lol, David thinking that we don't know about the Kirat and so on with these differences. Ha ha ha, lol, try again." And it's like, wait, I've got piles of Muslim books that say perfect preservation right down to the letter, only one Quran ever since the time of Muhammad. And then when we finally expose it as a lie, then the response is, "Lol, we knew this all along." Wait a minute. So you knew that all these guys were lying?
Yeah.
And you went along with it?
So when they say perfect preservation, word for word, letter for letter, dot for dot, nothing ever changed.
So now it's amazing. You go back 8 years and we say, "Hey, there's more than one Quran. There are differences and so on." We're the liars. And now if you say one Quran, they say, "Ha ha, you're a liar. We already know about the different Qurans." It's like, this is amazing stuff, man. So anyway, we'll talk about that tomorrow.
It's a wild, wild world. Chris K made a final super chat and said, "Does anyone take Momo the Chomo seriously?"
I like Momo the Chomo.
I never thought about that before. But yeah. That's good. That's good. That means child molester for those who are not aware. In slang. Yeah. But yes, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks everyone for anything. And have a good day. Have a fantastic day. And as always,
stay away from Islam.
Good point.
I agree completely.